At our wedding, my husband proudly announced that I would only get $50 a month to buy groceries. His words shocked me, and the happy, celebratory atmosphere instantly turned cold. "I'm so lucky to have such a cheap housemaid," he said, and I realized that's how he saw me. It felt like everything was fading to darkness. Suddenly, my father stood up and shouted, "Is that all you have to say, you jerk?" Jack, my husband, looked down on him and arrogantly said, "Don't get too cocky, old man." Jack didn't know what was coming. "My name is Sarah. I met Jack in college, and we were in the same year. After graduation, we lost touch, but when we were both 24, Jack invited me to a reunion. That night, I drank a little too much and felt sick. Jack was kind and looked after me, telling everyone not to force me to drink. I saw how much he'd changed since our college days, and he was so caring, like he treated me as if I were precious. He confessed that he'd liked me back in college and threw the reunion just to see me again. We started dating, and after a few months, I moved into his apartment. At 25, he proposed, and we got married. It turned out Jack was the heir to a large company. He never bragged about it, but people often told me I was lucky to marry him. His parents seemed really nice when we met them after our engagement, and I felt at ease. My parents were also happy about our marriage. My father, who owned a small business and had worked hard from a young age, was probably relieved that I wouldn't have to struggle financially anymore. Planning our wedding was exciting. We booked the venue and picked out my wedding dress together. But one evening, just a few months before the wedding, Jack said something unexpected at dinner. "Sarah, your cooking is always delicious. I think you'd be great at running the house as a full-time housewife," he said. I was surprised, because I had planned to continue working even after we got married. Jack had never mentioned wanting me to quit my job. He continued, "It's fine if you work part-time while doing housework and taking care of the kids. I'm sure you'd like some pocket money too." But I had been working hard at my job and wanted to keep working full-time. "I need to train a successor for the company, leave the money-making to me, and focus on being a homemaker," he said, smiling proudly like he was pleased to be the only one bringing in money. "But we don't even have kids yet, and even if we do, I still want to work. I don't want to put everything on you," I replied, trying to make him understand. My insistence seemed to upset Jack, and his face suddenly darkened. "I won't slack off on housework or raising kids, I promise," I found myself saying, because I really wanted to keep working. Jack smiled brightly and said, "Okay, if you insist, that's fine. They say women feel uneasy when they lose touch with society, so go ahead and do your best with housework and childcare." I was relieved that he agreed, but something about his words, "do your best with housework and childcare," didn't sit right with me. When I talked about it with my friends, they told me, "Jack cares about you, Sarah, he's a good husband." Their words made me feel happy, like I was being cared for, and it eased my concerns. After that, Jack and I would sometimes talk about our future. "Sarah, you're such a strong, independent woman who wants to keep working even after we get married. I'm lucky to have someone like you as my wife," he would say. His kind words always made me happy. "I'll help out with some of the housework too." "All right, I'll handle the household accounts and give you the living expenses. We'll stick to that budget each month," he added. I was touched by his offer because I had always thought managing finances was a woman's job. I felt relieved knowing I wouldn't have to do everything myself. Our wedding day finally came, surrounded by many guests. The ceremony went smoothly, and I was filled with happiness. But then, at the end of the ceremony, something shocking happened. During his speech, Jack suddenly said, "I'm going to make my wife work with only $50 for groceries every month." I was stunned, my mouth dropped open in disbelief. The other guests began whispering, and the once joyful atmosphere turned cold. Jack grinned at me, oblivious to the fact that he had just ruined our wedding. "I'm so lucky to have such a cheap maid," he said. I couldn't believe my ears. What was he talking about? I was horrified by his sudden change. I never agreed to such a ridiculous plan of only $50 for groceries. "You agreed when I said I'd handle the finances, didn't you?" he said. "Well, yes," I stammered, realizing that this might have been his plan all along. I felt like everything had just turned upside down. Then Jack said, "I let my wife say she wants to do all the housework and childcare while working full-time. I'm sure she'll be able to handle all the chores perfectly and make nutritious, filling meals for just $50 a month." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Quickly, I covered the mic with my hand and said, "Don't just say whatever you want. I won't accept this." Jack looked at me, confused. What's wrong? Didn't I tell you to do your best with the housework and childcare? Aren't you supposed to help out too? I never said anything like that, I replied. We can't live together like this. Suddenly, Jack's expression changed. His eyes grew cold, and he whispered in my ear, we're bound by this ceremony. It's too late to cancel the marriage now, right? We've already turned in our marriage certificate. Do you really want to get divorced? You're threatening me? Quit messing with me, I said, shocked. I never thought I'd argue with Jack, especially on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I felt full of regret and anger. My face grew hot, and tears started to well up in my eyes. This was what I had signed up for. I couldn't believe I was being treated like a servant by the man I had married. At that moment, I regretted marrying Jack. Just then, someone suddenly stood up and walked toward us. It was my father, Robert. His face was red with anger, and his eyes were filled with fury as he glared at Jack. How dare you treat my daughter like this in front of her parents? My father shouted. His voice froze the tense atmosphere, and the guests held their breath, watching the standoff between my father and Jack. What's your problem? Don't get so cocky, Jack said, looking down on my father with an evil expression I had never seen before. It sent a chill down my spine. My father was the president of a large corporation, and I was his successor. Jack's company was small, and I couldn't understand why he was acting so arrogant. When I had introduced my father to Jack, he had praised my father, saying he was a great man, even though his company was small. He had also told me that his feelings for me wouldn't change because of my family's background. I realized then that Jack had just been using sweet words to deceive me. As Jack was about to say something else to my father, we all heard the loud crash of glass shattering. Everyone turned to see what had happened. There, standing in the doorway, was Jack's father. His hand was shaking, and his face had turned an alarming shade of blue. His expression was full of panic, in complete contrast to Jack's calm demeanor. Jack's father looked like he was about to faint, his face pale and trembling. I could understand why. His son had been saying things that would anger the last person he'd want to upset. Shut up, it's all your fault, Dad, Jack snapped. Just as a father-son argument was about to break out, my father's voice echoed through the room. That's enough. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then my father calmly asked, Sarah, what are you going to do? Do you still want to marry this man? I quietly shook my head. I can't be happy marrying a man like this, a man who would treat me like a maid, trying to make me live on just $50 for food each month. I can't bear the thought of being with him. This is economic abuse, isn't it? Jack, I will sue you. I'm also going to annul our marriage. Be prepared for that. Jack seemed unfazed. What? Are you okay with being a divorcee? He sneered. Well, you're going to be one too, so we might as well share the pain. I won't hold back anymore. I had completely lost all feelings for him. Once I realized he didn't love me, I knew I couldn't stay with him under such ridiculous conditions. I'd rather be a divorcee than be treated like this. My father nodded in agreement. That's probably for the best. Then, with a cold look, my father added, as for your company, we will take appropriate action. I wonder what will happen to it now. It seemed Jack finally understood the seriousness of the situation. He dropped to his knees and begged for mercy. Please, we'll teach him a lesson. Don't cancel the marriage. Sarah was wrong. Please forgive me. I'll let you handle the housework, child care, and work however you want. I won't limit your food expenses anymore. You can even hire a maid and relax if you want. Let's go home, Dad, I said. I apologized to all the guests and returned their gift money. Then I canceled the wedding. Thanks to the skilled lawyer my father hired, we were able to sue Jack in court. The reason for our broken engagement was determined to be Jack's fault, and he was forced to pay for all the wedding costs. On top of that, I received compensation. Because he failed at securing a convenient marriage and humiliated his father by making him beg on his knees, Jack was disowned by his parents. He would never be able to become the CEO of the company now. Desperate, Jack caused trouble at work and got into legal trouble with the police. From what I heard, he ended up getting fired and, in the end, became lost, living aimlessly with no stable job. Of course, after all the deceit and being abandoned by his family, there was no chance he would ever marry into a wealthy family again. His life turned miserable. As for me, I became a divorcee, but my father introduced me to a kind and sincere young employee at his company. We've been dating, and we're planning to get married next year. I'm Amalia, and from my earliest memories, responsibility was my constant companion. Our modest home was always bustling with activity, my two younger brothers running around, and later, my baby sister who came into our lives when I was 10. "Amalia, honey, could you help change Sarah's diaper?" Mom would call out, her voice tired from working double shifts. I'd drop whatever I was doing and rush to help. That was our normal, everyone pitched in, except Sarah. From the moment she arrived, she was different. "She's just a baby, let her be," Dad would say, waving off any concerns about her behavior. I watched as my parents worked themselves to exhaustion, trying to provide for us all. Dad at the construction site, Mom cleaning houses, they did everything they could to keep food on our table and dreams alive in our hearts. My brothers, Mike and David, were the middle children, often lost in the shuffle between my responsibilities and Sarah's privileges. We shared knowing looks across the dinner table when Sarah would throw another tantrum and get her way again. I started working right after high school, determined to break free from the cycle of just getting by. The local diner wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Every penny I earned went into my college fund jar, hidden away in my closet. I'd count it late at night, dreaming of the day I'd have enough to start classes at the community college. Within a year, my managers noticed my dedication. I went from waitressing to handling the books, and suddenly, my college dreams didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. I enrolled in evening classes, juggling work and studies with a determination that surprised even me. The exhaustion was real. Some nights I'd fall asleep over my textbooks, only to wake up at dawn for another shift. But watching Sarah sleep until noon, skip school whenever she felt like it, and face no consequences only fueled my drive to succeed. "You're going to burn yourself out," Dad warned one evening, finding me studying in the kitchen at midnight. I looked up from my accounting homework and smiled. "Maybe, but I'm going somewhere, Dad. I promise you that." My college degree opened doors I never thought possible. First National Bank hired me as a junior analyst, and I threw myself into the work with the same determination that got me through school. Within months, my supervisor pulled me aside. "Amalia, I've never seen someone pick things up so quickly," she said. "Keep this up, and you'll go far here." She wasn't wrong. I had a knack for numbers, and an even better one for dealing with people. While others complained about office politics, I navigated them effortlessly. Maybe all those years of managing family dynamics had taught me something useful after all. Meanwhile, my brothers Mike and David had moved out, starting their own lives. But Sarah? She was still at home, living the same consequence-free life she always had. Mom would call me with updates I didn't want to hear. "Sarah was out until 3 a.m. again," she'd say, sighing. "I worry, but you know how she is." I did know. I also knew about the parade of boyfriends, the failing grades, and the general lack of direction. But it wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own life now, my own apartment, my own goals. Then came the call that changed everything. "Sarah's pregnant," Mom announced one morning. "The father's gone to Arizona. Says he wants nothing to do with it." I gripped my phone tighter. And we'll help her raise the baby, of course. What else can we do?" Of course they would. Sarah was still their precious baby, even at 18, even pregnant with her own child. I stayed silent, already knowing what was coming next. "You'll help too, won't you, Amalia? Come over on weekends? You're so good with children." That's when I started developing an impressive array of excuses. Urgent work projects. Professional development courses. Client meetings. Anything to avoid spending my precious free time taking care of yet another child. "I don't understand you anymore," Mom said during one particularly tense phone call. "You used to be so helpful." "I used to be a child forced to be helpful," I corrected her. "I'm an adult now, with my own life." "But family works both ways, Mom. Or have you forgotten the money I send every month?" That usually shut them up, at least temporarily. The checks I wrote were substantial, enough to cover Sarah's prenatal care, then baby supplies, then ongoing expenses. But it was never enough to buy their approval. My Aunt Lisa told me over coffee one day, "They're calling you heartless behind your back, you know. Saying you've changed, become cold." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream create patterns in the dark liquid. Let them talk. They've never understood me anyway. They say you're ungrateful, she pressed on. I looked her straight in the eye. Ungrateful for what? The privilege of raising their other children? The opportunity to now raise their grandchild? I've earned everything I have, Aunt Lisa. Everything. The promotion to senior analyst came through that week. My salary increased again, and so did the checks I sent home. But I kept my boundaries firm. No weekends babysitting. No emergency childcare. No last-minute favors. Let them call me callous. I'd spent enough of my life being the responsible one. Between client meetings and financial reports, romance wasn't exactly a priority. My dating app sat mostly unused on my phone until that rainy Tuesday night when James's message popped up. Something about his profile seemed different, maybe it was the genuine smile, or the lack of shirtless gym selfies. I notice you work in finance, his message read. I'm actually an investment advisor. Maybe we could bore each other with market talk over coffee? That coffee turned into dinner, which turned into weekends, which turned into 2 years of the kind of relationship I'd never thought I'd have time for. James was patient, understanding about my work schedule, and somehow managed to make me laugh even after my most stressful days. You know, he said one evening as we walked through the park, I never thought I'd find someone who understands both compound interest and my terrible jokes. Then came the proposal, nothing flashy, just us in my apartment after a home-cooked meal. I can't imagine my life without you, he said, holding out the ring. Marry me? I said yes, before he could even finish asking. Introducing him to my family was surprisingly smooth. Even Sarah behaved herself, which was a minor miracle. My parents were overjoyed, finally, their workaholic daughter was settling down. He's wonderful, Amalia, Mom gushed after our first family dinner together. And did you see how great he is with Tommy? She meant Sarah's son, my nephew, who had indeed taken an instant liking to James. The wedding was beautiful, and married life started out perfectly. James fit into the family like he'd always been there. He'd play with Tommy for hours when we visited, teaching him to throw a ball or build with blocks. Sarah watched these interactions with an odd intensity one didn't quite register at the time. He's going to be such an amazing father, she'd say, smiling at me meaningfully. You're so lucky, Amalia. That's when the questions started. First from my family, then from James himself. Don't you think it's time? He'd ask, watching Tommy run around our living room. We're not getting any younger. I'd explain my position again and again. I want us to be completely ready. We need our own house first, not this apartment. We need savings, security. But we're doing well, he'd counter. Both have good jobs, what are we waiting for? For the right time, I'd insist. One child, when we're ready. That's the plan we agreed on. He'd sigh and drop it, but I could feel his disappointment. During family gatherings, I'd catch him looking wistfully at Tommy. Your sister manages just fine, he'd say sometimes, not quite keeping the edge out of his voice. My sister lives with our parents and relies on their retirement savings, I'd reply. That's not what I want for our child. The tension grew slowly, almost imperceptibly. Like watching storm clouds gather on a sunny day, you know the rain is coming, but you tell yourself it's still far away. I was too focused on my next promotion, our house savings fund, the 5-year plan I'd carefully crafted. 5 years of marriage, and spring cleaning still meant going through James's mess. He never could keep his side of the closet organized. That Saturday morning started like any other, me sorting through old receipts, forgotten gym clothes, and the usual clutter that accumulated on his shelves. That's when I found it. A phone I'd never seen before, tucked behind his winter sweaters. My stomach tightened as I picked it up. Not his work phone. Not his personal phone. It wasn't even locked. My hands shook as I opened the messages. The first one I saw was from Sarah. My baby sister. Miss you already. Can't wait until Saturday when she's at work again. Hundreds of messages. Pictures I wish I could unsee. Conversations about me. LOL, she's so clueless, always at the office. All she cares about is her precious career. The timestamps went back months. My legs gave out, and I sat there on the closet floor, reading message after message, each one worse than the last. Then I saw it, the message that made my world stop spinning. Baby's definitely yours. Doctor confirmed today. 12 weeks along. I don't remember driving to my parents' house. I don't remember much except the phone clutched in my white-knuckled grip. Sarah was there, of course. Saturday morning cartoons with Tommy. One big happy family. What the hell is this? I threw the phone on the coffee table. Tommy looked up, startled, and Mom quickly sent him to play in his room. Sarah didn't even flinch. She picked up the phone, scrolled through it casually like she was checking the weather. Oh, well, I guess you know now. That's all you have to say? You're sleeping with my husband? She shrugged, actually shrugged. We're in love, Amalia. These things happen. And now with the baby coming, James and I want to get married. Once Amalia stops being difficult about it. Difficult? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm being difficult? Well, yes, Sarah said, like she was explaining something simple to a child. You never wanted children anyway. You're too busy with your precious career. James needs a real family. I turned to my parents, waiting for them to say something, anything, to defend me. To condemn this betrayal. Instead, Mom sat down next to Sarah, patting her hand. Amalia, try to be reasonable. Tommy needs a father figure, and James is so good with him. And now with another baby coming. Reasonable? My voice cracked. My husband and sister are having an affair, and you want me to be reasonable? Dad cleared his throat. Well, you never wanted children, honey. And James, he's always wanted to be a father. Maybe this is for the best. When was the last time you even cooked him dinner? Sarah would make a proper wife. I looked at them, my family, all sitting there, defending the indefensible. Sarah, smug and pregnant with my husband's child. Mom, already planning the next wedding. Dad, avoiding my eyes, but clearly on their side. A proper wife, I repeated numbly. Like your precious Sarah, who mooches off you and cheats with her sister's husband. Sarah rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic, Amalia. Just go back to your big office and your important meetings. Leave the family stuff to people who actually care about it. I barely remember the drive home from my parents' house. The world seemed unreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart instead of my own. When I walked through our front door, James was there in the living room, acting like it was just another normal Saturday. Hey, honey, he moved to hug me, that familiar smile on his face. The smile I used to love. The smile that now made me sick to my stomach. I stepped back, holding up his second phone. Want to explain this? The change in his face was instant, first confusion, then recognition, then fear. Where did you? Found it while cleaning. You really should find better hiding spots for your affair phones. Amalia, I can explain. Explain what? The messages? The photos? Or maybe explain how you got my sister pregnant? He tried denial first, like they all do. It's not, I didn't, but he must have seen something in my face, because suddenly his whole demeanor changed. The mask dropped completely. Fine. Yes, Sarah and I are together, he snapped. What did you expect? You're never home. All you care about is work, work, work. When was the last time we even had a real conversation about starting a family? Oh, so this is my fault? You cheated because I wanted financial security before having children? You never wanted children. Not really. You always had some excuse, the house, the savings, the right time. Sarah actually wants a family. She understands what's important in life. I looked at this man, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and felt nothing but disgust. What's important in life is loyalty, honor, basic human decency. But I guess those things aren't important to you or my precious sister. Don't act all high and mighty, he snarled. You're just angry because Sarah's giving me what you wouldn't. The divorce papers were filed the next day. I had documentation of the affair, so it went through quickly. My brothers, Mike and David, came to help me move out of the apartment. They were the only ones who stood by me. We always knew Sarah was spoiled, Mike said as we packed boxes, but this is a new low. David couldn't even say her name. They're dead to me, he declared. Both of them. Through my brothers, I heard the updates I never wanted but couldn't help knowing. James and Sarah got married in a small ceremony. My parents were there, of course, beaming proudly. The baby was born, a girl. They moved into a small house in the suburbs. Tommy started calling James Dad. Mom keeps trying to get us to visit them, Mike told me during one of our monthly dinners. Says we need to be a family again. We are a family, David said, raising his glass. The three of us, that's enough. I nodded, grateful for my brother's loyalty in a world where loyalty seemed to mean nothing anymore. We were the only ones who understood that some betrayals can't be forgiven, some bridges can't be rebuilt, and some families are better off broken. 4 years can change everything. My new apartment overlooked the city skyline, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and enough space to finally display the art collection I'd always wanted. The Mercedes in my reserved parking spot gleamed under the garage lights. I'd made it, exactly as I'd planned. My brothers visited often, bringing news and rumors. Sarah and James struggling to make ends meet. 3 moves in 2 years, each apartment smaller than the last. But I didn't care. Their life wasn't my concern anymore. Until that Tuesday evening when my phone lit up with a number I'd hoped never to see again. Amalia? James's voice. 4 years older, but still familiar enough to make my stomach clench. Please don't hang up. I should have. Instead, I listened. We need your help, he said, as if he had any right to ask me for anything. Sarah's had an accident. Broke her leg badly, compound fracture. She's had surgery, but she can't move around, can't take care of the kids. And, she's pregnant again. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, wondering if this was some kind of cosmic joke. The kids need someone to pick them up from school, watch them until I get home from work. Tommy's getting too big to handle everything himself, and with the new baby coming. He paused. We thought maybe you could help. You thought what? My voice came out eerily calm. They're your nephews, Amalia. Your family. Sarah can't even get to the bathroom by herself right now. My family? I repeated. The sister who slept with my husband and the husband who cheated on me, that's my family? Don't be like that, he snapped, his tone shifting from pleading to accusatory. This isn't about us. It's about innocent children who need help. Or are you too selfish to care about them too? Selfish? I almost laughed. That's rich, coming from you. We're struggling here. His voice rose. Do you know how expensive kids are? I'm working overtime just to keep food on the table. We can't even afford a decent apartment anymore. Meanwhile, you're living it up in your luxury condo with your fancy car. So that's what this is about? Money? Not all of us can focus only on our careers, he said bitterly. Some of us have real responsibilities. Must be nice, having all that money and no one to spend it on but yourself. Must be nice having the family you stole and no way to support them, I replied coldly. Sounds like a real dream come true. The kids need parents who didn't build their relationship on betrayal. Goodbye, James. I hung up mid-protest and blocked his number before he could call back. My mother's number showing up on my phone was almost as unwelcome as James's had been. I answered anyway, some old habit I couldn't quite break. Amalia? Mom's voice had that tone, the one she always used when she wanted something. We need to talk about Sarah. She needs help. James called you, didn't he? About her leg? I paced my living room, fighting the urge to hang up immediately. Yes, he did. And I'll tell you what I told him, not my problem. How can you be so cold? She's your sister. She's struggling with 3 children, well, soon to be 3. The sister who slept with my husband? That sister? Mom sighed heavily. That was years ago, Amalia. You need to move past it. We're family. Funny how family only matters when you need something from me. We've helped her as much as we can, Mom's voice cracked a little. But she keeps asking for money, for the kids, for the rent, for everything. We've gone through all our savings. Your father and I, we can't keep this up. I couldn't help but laugh. So the golden child is finally becoming too expensive to maintain? Don't be cruel. She's never learned to. Mom trailed off. To what? Work? Support herself? Take responsibility for her actions? Gee, I wonder why that is. She just keeps having babies, Mom said, frustration finally breaking through. She won't look for a job, says she's too busy with the children. But she's always asking for money, always needing something. Sounds like exactly the person you raised her to be, I said coldly. The princess who never had to face consequences. You have no right to speak to me like that. Mom's voice rose. I am your mother. And whose fault is it that Sarah turned out this way? Who taught her that she never had to work for anything? That someone would always bail her out? We did our best. No, you did your easiest. And now you're calling me because the monster you created is too expensive to feed. You have a duty to help your family. Mom was almost shouting now. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I cut in. You mean like supporting my sister when she had an affair with my husband? Or like calling me selfish for wanting financial security before having children? I don't owe you anything. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with 4 years of pent-up rage. The expensive view from my apartment windows suddenly seemed like the best revenge, my life, built exactly as I'd planned it, without their help or their approval. Mike called me one evening while I was reviewing quarterly reports. You'll never guess who tried calling me today. Sarah, I already knew. The desperation tour was making its rounds. Bingo. Wanted me to help with the kids, maybe loan them some money until they get back on their feet. He snorted. As if they were ever on their feet to begin with. What did you tell her? Same thing David told her yesterday, that some betrayals can't be undone. That what she did to you wasn't just cheating, it was destroying a family. She started crying, saying we were being cruel, that family should help family. He paused. I reminded her she didn't seem too concerned about family when she was sleeping with your husband. I leaned back in my office chair, looking out at the city lights. How did she take that? About as well as you'd expect. Started screaming about how we're all against her, how nobody understands how hard her life is. He chuckled darkly. Guess karma finally caught up with her. 2 weeks later, David brought the news I'd been expecting. They moved in with Mom and Dad. All of them, Sarah, James, the kids, and the baby on the way. Dad's converting his workshop into another bedroom. How are Mom and Dad handling it? Remember how peaceful retirement was supposed to be? Well, now they're full-time babysitters and ATMs. Mom's watching the kids while Sarah recovers, which apparently means scrolling through her phone all day. Dad's dipping into his pension to cover their expenses. I shook my head. They made their choice. Mom came by my place yesterday, David continued. Wanted to know if I'd talk to you about helping out. Said they're overwhelmed. I bet they are. The next day, Mom showed up at my door unannounced. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Please," she started before I could even speak. "Just listen." "No," I cut her off. "You listen. You chose all of it. You chose to spoil Sarah rotten. You chose to support her when she betrayed me. You chose to let them move in. These are your choices, Mom. Live with them. And if you show up at my door again, I'm calling the police. Are we clear?" She started to speak, but I cut her off again. "The next time you feel overwhelmed, remember this was your choice. You chose the daughter who betrayed her sister over the one who only ever worked hard and did the right thing. Now live with it." I closed the door on her protests and blocked her number, the last family number I had left to block, besides my brother's. That night, I had dinner with Marcus, the man I'd been seeing for the past few months. He knew my story, knew about the betrayal and the aftermath. He'd never pushed, never rushed, just listened and understood. After I told him about the latest family events, he reached across the table and took my hand. "Family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who you choose." I squeezed his hand back, thinking about my brothers who stood by me, about Marcus who understood me, about the life I'd built on my own terms. In the end, Sarah hadn't stolen my family, she'd just helped me see which parts of it were worth keeping. "My brothers are coming over this weekend," I told him. "Would you like to join us?" His smile was answer enough. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace with where I was and who I had chosen to be. The drama playing out at my parents' house wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own life to live, my own family to build, and my own happiness to protect.
I remember those days like they were yesterday. Mom, Dad, and me, Megan, the perfect little family. We weren't rich or famous, just ordinary folks living our best life. Dad worked as an accountant, always buried in numbers, but he'd light up when he got home. Mom was a teacher, spreading knowledge and kindness wherever she went. We'd spend weekends exploring the country, piling into our beat-up station wagon and hitting the road. Dad would blast his favorite oldies, and Mom would sing along, terribly off-key but not caring one bit. I'd sit in the back, rolling my eyes but secretly loving every minute of it. Those road trips were the best. We'd stop at dingy diners, ordering greasy burgers and sharing a giant milkshake. Mom would always steal my fries, claiming, "I'm just testing them for poison, sweetie." When we weren't traveling, we'd hit up the local mall. I'd drag them from store to store, trying on ridiculous outfits and begging for the latest toys. Mom was the voice of reason, but Dad was a softie. He'd slip me a few extra bucks when Mom wasn't looking, whispering, "Our little secret, Meggie." Friday nights were pizza nights. We'd order in, sprawl out on the living room floor, and watch cheesy movies. Dad would try to explain the plots, Mom would shush him, and I'd stuff my face with pepperoni, not caring about anything but the moment. I was 11 when Mom started feeling tired all the time. At first, we didn't think much of it. Teaching is exhausting after all. But then came the doctor visits, the worried whispers, the hushed phone calls. I didn't understand what was happening. Nobody told me anything, but I could feel the change in the air. The laughter became less frequent, the road trips stopped, and pizza nights were replaced with quiet, tense dinners. One night, I overheard Dad on the phone, his voice cracking as he spoke. "The treatments aren't working, Mike. I don't know what we're going to do." That's when I knew. Something was very wrong with Mom, and our perfect little world was about to shatter. I wish I could go back to those happy days, freeze time, and stay in that bubble of blissful ignorance forever. But life doesn't work that way. The storm was coming, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. For now, I close my eyes and try to remember the good times. The smell of Mom's perfume, the sound of Dad's laughter, the taste of Friday night pizza. Those memories are all I have left of the life I once knew, the life I desperately wish I could return to. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because it was pizza night, but there was no pizza, no laughter, no Mom. Just silence and the horrible beeping of hospital machines. "Megan, sweetie," Dad said, his voice cracking. "Mom, She's gone." Just like that, my world collapsed. Mom, my rock, my best friend, was gone. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I just stood there, numb, as Dad hugged me, his tears soaking my hair. The next few weeks were a blur of black clothes, hushed voices, and casseroles I couldn't bring myself to eat. I kept expecting Mom to walk through the door, to tell me it was all a bad dream. But she never did. Then, about 6 months after we lost Mom, something changed. Dad started going out more. I thought he was getting better, until I saw her. She was tall, blonde, and nothing like Mom. Her name was Karen, and she had a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Megan, this is Karen," Dad said, looking nervous. "We've been seeing each other." I couldn't believe it. Mom wasn't even cold in her grave, and he was already replacing her. Karen bent down, her face inches from mine. "Hi, Megan. I've heard so much about you." When Dad wasn't looking, Karen's smile dropped. Her eyes turned cold, calculating. In that moment I knew. This woman was trouble. Over the next few weeks, Karen was everywhere. She'd come over for dinner, watch TV with us, even try to help me with homework. But the moment Dad's back was turned, the mask would slip. "Listen, kid," she hissed one day when we were alone. "I'm here to stay. Don't get any ideas about messing this up for me." I tried to tell Dad, I really did, but he just shook his head. "Megan, I know this is hard for you, but Karen's a good person. You're just jealous. Maybe we should get you to talk to someone." Jealous? I couldn't believe it. My own father thought I was making this up. Before I knew it, I was sitting in a therapist's office, being told I had adjustment issues and difficulty with change. Karen had somehow convinced everyone, Dad, our relatives, even the neighbors, that I was troubled. Poor Megan, I'd overhear her saying on the phone. "She's having such a hard time. There are mental problems. We're getting her the help she needs." Then came the bombshell. A year and a half after Mom died, Dad dropped the news. "Megan, Karen and I, we're getting married. We thought it'd be best if you spent the summer at camp. Give you some time to adjust." But I knew the truth. They were shipping me off so I wouldn't ruin their perfect day with my sour face, as Karen put it. I left for camp with a heavy heart, knowing that when I returned, everything would be different. My home wouldn't be mine anymore. My family was changing, and there was nothing I could do about it. I returned from camp with a knot in my stomach. The house looked the same from the outside, but as soon as I stepped through the door, I knew everything had changed. "Welcome home," Megan, Karen said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "We need to talk about room arrangements. With the baby coming, we'll need to make some changes." My head spun. "Baby? What baby?" Dad's face lit up. "That's right, you don't know. Karen's pregnant, you're going to be a big sister." Karen led me upstairs, chattering about nursery colors and baby names. We stopped at my room, or what used to be my room. "We've started converting this into the nursery," Karen said, pushing open the door. My heart sank. My posters were gone, replaced by pastel wallpaper. My desk had vanished, a crib standing in its place. "Where's my stuff?" I managed to choke out. Karen waved dismissively. "Oh, we moved you to the guest room. It's cozier anyway." The guest room was barely bigger than a closet. My things were piled haphazardly on the bed, some boxes still sealed. "This is temporary, right?" I asked, looking at Dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Well, Meggie, with the new baby." I got the message. I was being pushed out, replaced. The next few months were a blur of doctor's appointments, baby showers, and me trying to make myself as small as possible. Karen's belly grew, and with it, her control over our lives. Then, one crisp fall morning, my little brother was born. Despite everything, when I held him for the first time, I felt a surge of love. For a moment I thought maybe things would get better. But Karen had other plans. "Careful, Megan," she'd say, snatching him away. "You might drop him. Or he's sleeping now. Maybe you can see him later." There was always an excuse, always a reason why I couldn't spend time with my brother. Dad was too busy with work and the new baby to notice. Years passed. I threw myself into school, counting down the days until I could leave for college. My brother grew into a sweet, curious kid, but Karen made sure our interactions were limited. Finally, my senior year arrived. One night I overheard Karen and Dad arguing. She needs to learn responsibility, Karen insisted. A job right out of high school would do her good. Dad's voice was firm. No, Sarah wanted her to go to college. We set aside money for it. Megan's going. I'd never been so grateful for my dad standing up for me. When my acceptance letter came, I cried with relief. I was getting out. I was going to start my own life, away from Karen's manipulations. On move-in day, Dad helped me pack the car. Karen and my brother stayed home. I'm proud of you, Meggie, Dad said, hugging me goodbye. Your mom would be too. As I drove away, watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, I felt a mix of sadness and hope. I was leaving behind the only home I'd known, and the little brother I never really got to know. But I was also driving towards freedom, towards a future where I could be myself without Karen's shadow looming over me. College was like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocation. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. Advertising became my passion, a world where creativity met strategy, and I could finally express myself freely. But even as I reveled in my newfound independence, there was always a nagging ache in my heart. My little brother, barely 6 when I left, was growing up without me. During rare visits home, I'd catch glimpses of the amazing kid he was becoming. Megan. Look what I drew, he'd exclaim, showing me his latest masterpiece. I'd ruffle his hair, cherishing these brief moments. It's awesome, buddy, you're quite the artist. Karen would inevitably interrupt, whisking him away for some urgent task or another. The distance between us grew with each passing year. Graduation day arrived, a bittersweet triumph. As I stood in my cap and gown scanning the crowd, I realized Dad and Karen weren't there. Later, a terse text arrived: congratulations on graduating. Dad, Karen. It stung, but I refused to let it dampen my spirits. I had a future to build. Thanks to my internships and portfolio, I landed a job at a hip advertising agency in the city. Grandma Mom's mom and my guardian angel helped me secure a tiny but cozy apartment. Your mother would be so proud, she said, pressing a check into my hand. This is for rent. She always wanted you to have a good start. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was challenging but rewarding. I made friends, went on dates, and slowly began to heal from the wounds of my past. For 3 years I lived in relative peace, with only occasional, awkward holiday visits to break the calm. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. Megan, it's Dad. I have some news. We've sold the house and bought a new place, bigger, more modern. I was hoping. Well, would you help us move? It might be a good chance for us to reconnect. I was speechless. After years of distance, this sudden olive branch felt surreal. Karen would be happy to see you too, he added, though I doubted that. And your brother? Megan, he's 12 now. He asks about you all the time. I closed my eyes, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to refuse, to protect myself from more hurt. But another part, the part that still missed my family, that longed for reconciliation, won out. Okay, I said finally. I'll come? Great Dad's relief was palpable. I'll text you the address. See you this weekend. As I packed a bag for the weekend, my emotions swirled. Hope mingled with anxiety, excitement with dread. Whatever happened, this visit would change everything. I just didn't know if it would be for better or worse. I pulled up to the address, my jaw dropping at the sight. The house was enormous, all sleek lines and modern architecture. It looked nothing like the cozy home I grew up in. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Dad opened it, a hesitant smile on his face. Meggie, you made it. Hi, Dad, I said, stepping inside. Karen appeared behind him, her smile as plastic as ever. Megan, how? Nice of you to come, she said, her tone suggesting anything but. I looked around, expecting to see my brother. Where's... Oh, he's staying with my parents for the weekend, Karen cut in smoothly. We thought it would be easier to move without him underfoot. The look in her eyes told me everything. This was deliberate. She'd made sure my brother wouldn't be here, denying me even this small chance to reconnect with him. Swallowing my disappointment and anger, I forced a smile. So where do you want me to start? For the next few hours, I threw myself into the work. I scrubbed floors, arranged furniture, and hung curtains. It was easier than trying to make conversation with Dad or enduring Karen's false pleasantries. As I was sorting through some boxes in what would be the study, I came across a pile of framed photos. My heart stopped as I recognized one particular frame. It was a portrait of Mom, the one that used to hang in my childhood bedroom. Her smile beamed at me from beneath a layer of dust. Clutching the photo, I walked into the living room where Dad and Karen were discussing paint colors. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "why is Mom's picture in a pile of junk?" Dad's face fell, a mix of guilt and sadness crossing his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but Karen beat him to it. "Oh, that old thing," she said dismissively. "We decided those photos don't really fit with the new decor. They're a bit superfluous, don't you think?" Superfluous. The word hit me like a slap. My mother's memory, reduced to an outdated decoration. "Superfluous," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "This is my mother, your wife," I added, looking at Dad. Dad at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Megan, we didn't mean." But I was already moving, gathering up every photo of Mom I could find. I found her old jewelry box, a few of her books. Without a word, I carried them out to my car, ignoring Karen's protests and Dad's weak attempts to explain. As I placed the last item in my trunk, I felt a storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Anger at Karen's callousness, disappointment in Dad's spinelessness, and a deep, aching sadness for the mother I'd lost and the family that seemed beyond repair. I slammed the trunk shut, the sound echoing in the quiet street. For a moment, I considered getting in the car and driving away, leaving this mess behind once and for all. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of Mom, her voice in my head telling me to be strong. Maybe it was the thought of my little brother who I still hadn't seen. Or maybe it was just sheer stubbornness, refusing to let Karen win. Whatever it was, I found myself walking back into the house. Karen was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding to avoid confrontation. Dad stood in the hallway looking lost, so I went back to cleaning, trying not to think about Dad's betrayal. As I was about to leave, Dad caught my arm. "Megan, wait. There's something else." I turned, eyebrow raised. "What now?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We're having a housewarming party in a few days. We would really appreciate your help." Before I could respond, Karen swooped in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh yes, Megan, we could really use your assistance. Perhaps you could handle the catering? I'll take care of the cleaning, invitations, and overall organization." I opened my mouth to refuse, but Dad jumped in. "Please, Meggie, all our relatives and friends will be there. We can't manage without you." His pleading eyes wore me down. Despite everything, a small part of me still wanted to make him happy. "Fine," I sighed. "I'll help with the food, I'll even pay for it myself." Karen's smile widened. "Wonderful. We're thinking of an Italian theme. You know, to christen the new kitchen." I nodded, an idea forming. "Actually, I know the best Italian restaurant. I'll order from there. Quality guaranteed." Oh, Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "What's the name of this restaurant?" "Bella Notte," replied, watching her carefully. She nodded, looking satisfied. "Sounds perfect. We'll leave it in your capable hands then." As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Karen's sudden agreeableness was suspicious. But I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. Over the next few days, I threw myself into planning the perfect menu. I called my friend Maria, owner of Bella Notte. "Megan, it's been too long," she answered cheerfully. "Hey Maria, I need a favor. My dad's having a housewarming party, and I'm in charge of food. Think you can help me out?" "For you? Anything. What are you thinking? We spent an hour crafting the perfect Italian spread. Antipasti platters, handmade pastas, tiramisu for dessert, the works. I spared no expense, wanting to prove I could handle this responsibility. After finalizing the order, I felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped this party might be a turning point. Maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal our fractured family. The next week dragged by slowly. I kept myself busy with work, but my mind often wandered to the upcoming party. I checked and double-checked the order, making sure everything was perfect. The day before the housewarming party, my phone rang. It was Maria from Bellinot. "Hey Megan, I'm a bit confused. Your stepmother called yesterday and asked to move the food delivery to today. Did the party date change?" My heart sank. What? No, it's supposed to be tomorrow. Oh, Maria sounded worried. Well, I wanted to double-check with you before making any changes. I thanked her, my mind racing. After hanging up, I immediately called Karen, my suspicions on high alert. "Hi Karen, just wanted to confirm the party details for tomorrow," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh yes, everything's set for tomorrow at 7 p.m, she replied smoothly. "We're looking forward to it." I thanked her and ended the call, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. It was clear now Karen had tried to change the delivery date behind my back. She wanted me to miss the party entirely. Taking a deep breath, I called Maria back. "Hey, it's me again. I need to cancel the order," I said, my voice tight. "Cancel? But Megan, are you sure? It's a lot of food and it's all paid for." "I know. Keep the payment, consider it a gift. Use the food for the restaurant if you can." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. The betrayal stung, but a part of me wasn't surprised. This was classic Karen, always finding new ways to push me out. The same evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my social media and saw my cousin was live streaming from the party. There it was, the housewarming in full swing, happening right now, a day early. I watched, a mix of hurt and anger building inside me, as Karen showed off the new house. She preened for the camera, pointing out design features and accepting compliments from guests. Suddenly a voice off camera asked, "Where's Megan? I thought she'd be here." Karen's face changed, a look of false concern replacing her smile. "Oh, you know Megan, she's always been a bit unsociable. Some mental health issues, poor dear. She said she couldn't make it." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Mental health issues? Unsociable? The lies flowed so easily from her lips. Karen quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation back to the house. "Now, who's ready for some amazing Italian food? It should be here any minute." The guests cheered, and Karen beamed at the camera. Half an hour passed, and I could see the guests starting to look restless. Karen's smile became strained as she kept assuring everyone the food would arrive any minute now. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the live stream. Karen's perfectly crafted facade was crumbling before my eyes. Her smile had become a grimace as she dialed the restaurant's number, the speakerphone amplifying every word for the gathered guests. "Hello, Bellinot. This is Karen. Where is our food order?" The response was clear and devastating. "I'm sorry, Mom, but that order was cancelled earlier today by Megan. There won't be any delivery." Karen's face contorted with rage. "What? That little John," she shrieked, turning to my father. "Call Megan right now." Dad, looking flustered, pulled out his phone. I watched, heart pounding, as he dialed my number. When I answered, his voice boomed through the speakerphone. "Megan, how could you cancel the food order? You've ruined everything." Taking a deep breath, I replied calmly, "Dad, why did you change the date of the housewarming? Why wasn't I invited?" The room fell silent. Dad's face paled as he stammered, "We," Karen said. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guests exchanged meaningful glances, eyeing Karen and Dad with suspicion. Suddenly, Karen snatched the phone from Dad's hand. "You ungrateful brat," she screeched. "After everything we've done for you, you're trying to sabotage us, aren't you?" I let her rant for a moment before speaking, my voice steady and clear. I think everyone can see now who really has mental health issues in this family. And it's not me. Karen's hysterical shouting filled the room, but I could see the damage was done. Guests were backing away, some already heading for the door. I'm done being your scapegoat, Karen, I said firmly. And Dad, I'm done watching you choose her over your own daughter. Goodbye. I ended the call and closed the live stream, my hands shaking but my resolve strong. It was over. The lies, the manipulation, all of it laid bare for everyone to see. In the days that followed, I ignored the barrage of calls and messages from Dad and other family members. I needed time to process, to heal. A week later, Dad showed up at my apartment. He looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed. "Megan, I'm so sorry," he began. "I've been blind. I let Karen control everything, and I lost sight of what really matters. Please, give me a chance to make things right." I wanted to slam the door in his face, but something in his expression stopped me. "It's not that simple, Dad. You abandoned me. You forgot about me." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "But I want to change. I promise I'll do better. Please, Meggie." Slowly, cautiously, we began to rebuild our relationship. Dad started calling regularly, and we met for coffee every week. He even brought my little brother along sometimes, away from Karen's watchful eye. As for Karen, I heard through the grapevine that she'd become something of a pariah among the family. Her lies exposed, she retreated into a shell of bitterness. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. I threw myself into my career, climbing the ranks at the advertising agency. My creativity flourished, fueled by the emotional turmoil I'd endured. I don't know what the future holds for my family. The wounds are deep, and healing takes time. But for the first time in years, I feel hopeful. I'm living life on my terms, pursuing my passions, and slowly, carefully, allowing love back into my heart. As I look out at the city lights from my apartment window, I can almost hear Mom's voice. "You're stronger than you know," Meggie, she used to say. And you know what? She was right.
I'm Robin, and my story begins in a house that never truly felt like home. My mother, a successful dentist at a private clinic, married my father, who worked as a manager in a trading company. When they tied the knot, Dad moved into Mom's house. I came along a year later, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. One day, Dad came home early, his face twisted in anger. "I quit," he announced, throwing his briefcase onto the couch. "That damn boss can find someone else to push around." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The house filled with the sound of the TV and the click-clack of Dad's game controller. The smell of beer became a constant presence. I was young, but I wasn't blind. I saw the way Mom's smile tightened when she came home to find Dad sprawled on the couch, surrounded by empty cans. "John, you need to find a job," Mom would say, her voice strained. "I'm looking, Sarah." "What do you want from me?" Dad would shout back. "There's nothing out there that matches my skills and pay grade." Their arguments became a nightly ritual. I'd hide in my room, pillow over my ears, trying to block out their angry voices. During their worst fights, Mom would pack me off to Aunt Lisa's house. Aunt Lisa lived just a 15-minute drive away with Uncle Mark and my cousin Tommy, who was a couple years younger than me. I loved being at their house. It was always warm and filled with laughter. Uncle Mark would teach me and Tommy how to play board games, and Aunt Lisa would bake cookies that filled the whole house with the smell of chocolate and vanilla. "You know you're always welcome here, sweetie," Aunt Lisa would whisper to me as she tucked me in at night. No matter what. Those words were a lifeline. As much as I loved my parents, being at Aunt Lisa's felt more like home than my own house ever did. One day, after a particularly nasty fight, I overheard Mom talking to Aunt Lisa in the kitchen. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Lisa," Mom sobbed. "But I have to try, for Robin's sake." I wanted to tell her she didn't have to, that I'd be okay if they split up. But the words stuck in my throat. I was just a kid, after all. What did I know about marriage and love? Little did I know, things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. Dad finally got a job, but it came with a catch: lots of business trips. At first, it seemed like a blessing. When Dad was away, the house was peaceful. Mom would help me with my homework, and we'd have quiet dinners together. But as the months went by, I started to notice something was off. The way Mom's face would tighten when Dad called to say he'd be away for another week. The hushed phone conversations she'd have with Aunt Lisa when she thought I couldn't hear. I was barely 8 when my world came crashing down. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon, and Mom was helping me with my math homework when the doorbell rang. I remember the confusion on her face as she opened the door to a man I'd never seen before. "Mrs. Thompson? I'm Robert Hanson, John's boss," the man said, his voice tight with anger. I watched from the stairs as Mom led him into the living room. Their voices were hushed, but I could hear the tension in every word. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," Mr. Hanson said, "but your husband has been having an affair with my wife." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw Mom's hands start to shake. That's impossible," she whispered. "John's been on business trips." Mr. Hanson pulled out an envelope. "I'm afraid not. These are photos of them together. The dates, well, they match up with some of his supposed business trips." I couldn't see the photos from where I was, but I saw Mom's face crumple as she looked at them. Mr. Hanson's voice softened slightly. "I'm divorcing my wife. I thought you deserved to know the truth. Do with this information what you will." After he left, I found Mom sitting on the couch, tears streaming down her face. When she saw me, she quickly wiped her eyes. "Robin, honey, I need you to go stay with Aunt Lisa for a few days, okay?" Her voice was shaky, but she tried to smile. "Mom and Dad need to have a serious talk." I nodded, not knowing what else to do. As Aunt Lisa drove me to her house, I couldn't shake the image of Mom's tear-stained face from my mind. Days passed, and finally, Mom came to pick me up. Dad wasn't with her. "Where's Dad?" I asked as we drove home. Mom's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Dad and I, we're going to be living apart for a while, sweetheart. We're getting a divorce." I felt a mix of relief and sadness wash over me. For a while, it seemed like things might get better. Mom and I settled into a new routine, just the two of us. But then, everything changed again. It started with Mom feeling tired all the time. Then came the day she found a lump. I remember sitting in the doctor's office, holding Mom's hand as the doctor said the word that would change our lives forever: cancer. "We'll fight this, Robin," Mom said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Together." But we weren't alone for long. Because just when I thought I'd seen the last of him, Dad came waltzing back into our lives. "I've changed," he said, standing on our doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. "I want to be here for you both." I wanted to slam the door in his face, but Mom let him in. She was too tired, too scared to fight anymore. Life took on a surreal quality after Mom's diagnosis. Our once orderly home became a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, chemotherapy sessions, and Dad's attempts at playing caretaker. "I quit my job," Dad announced one day, puffing out his chest like he deserved a medal. "Someone needs to take Sarah to her treatments and look after you, Robin." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But even at 9 years old, I could see through his act. The house grew messier by the day, with Dad only bothering to clean when Mom was due back from the hospital. "Robin, sweetie, can you tidy up a bit?" he'd ask, not even looking up from his phone. "Your mom's coming home tomorrow." I did my best, but what could a 9-year-old really do? The dishes piled up, laundry overflowed, and dust gathered on every surface. I wanted to tell Mom, to ask for help, but I couldn't bear to add to her worries. One day, I overheard Aunt Lisa talking to Uncle Mark in hushed tones. "Can you believe that bastard?" she hissed. "He didn't quit, he got fired. His boss kicked him out for sleeping with his wife." My heart sank. It was just another lie in a long string of deceptions. Then came the day that shattered what little faith I had left in my father. Aunt Lisa was driving me home early, Mom was in the hospital for another round of chemo, and Dad was supposed to be waiting for me. We walked into the house without knocking. The sound of giggles and creaking bed springs filled the air. Aunt Lisa's face turned red with fury as we stood there, frozen in the hallway. "John Thompson," she bellowed. "Get your ass out here right now." Dad stumbled out of the bedroom, hastily zipping up his pants. Behind him, a woman I recognized as Mr. Hansen's ex-wife peeked out, clutching a sheet to her chest. "Lisa," Dad said, his voice annoyingly casual. "You're early." Aunt Lisa was shaking with rage. "How dare you? Your wife is fighting for her life, and you're here, you're..." Dad just smirked. "Come on, Lisa. Sarah's sick. A man has needs." I felt sick to my stomach. Aunt Lisa opened her mouth to yell again, but Dad cut her off. "You won't tell Sarah about this," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "It would only make her condition worse. You wouldn't want that on your conscience, would you?" Aunt Lisa's face paled. She grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the house. "I'm so sorry you had to see that, Robin," she said as we drove away. "Your father, he's not a good man." I nodded, feeling numb. "I know," I whispered. "I don't love him anymore." For the next year, I lived in a state of constant tension. I'd go to school, pretending everything was normal. I'd visit Mom in the hospital, holding her hand and telling her about my day, carefully omitting anything about Dad. And then, one cold autumn morning, the call came. Mom was gone. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a world that suddenly made no sense. Aunt Lisa held me as I sobbed, while Dad just stood there, looking almost relieved. The day we buried Mom was the hardest of my life. I stood there, numb and hollow, as they lowered her casket into the ground. Dad put on quite a show, sniffling and dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. A week after the funeral, we met with Mom's lawyer. I sat there, picking at a loose thread on my black dress, as the lawyer cleared his throat and began to read. "To my beloved daughter, Robin," he said, "I leave all my worldly possessions, including our family home and all my savings." The room went dead silent. I looked up, confused, to see Dad's face turning an ugly shade of purple. "What the hell?" he exploded. "That can't be right. I'm her husband." The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "I'm afraid it's all very clear, Mr. Thompson. Your daughter inherits everything. She'll be able to manage the property from the age of 18. Dad whirled on Aunt Lisa, who was sitting beside me. "You," he snarled. "You put her up to this, didn't you? Poisoned her against me." Aunt Lisa just looked at him, her eyes cold. "Sarah knew you, John. She knew you better than you think." We left the office with Dad still ranting. For the next few days, he barely looked at me, like I was the one who had betrayed him. But I was too lost in my grief to care. 3 months crawled by. I was sitting in my room one afternoon, flipping through an old photo album, when I heard unfamiliar laughter from downstairs. Curious, I crept down to find Dad in the living room with a woman I recognized all too well, his mistress, Mr. Hansen's ex-wife. "Robin," Dad said, his voice falsely cheery. "Come meet Candy. She's going to be living with us now." Candy gave me a wide, fake smile. "Hi, sweetie. You should call me Mom from now on, okay?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "She is not my mother," I spat out. Over the next few days, Candy went on a rampage through our house. I watched, helpless and furious, as she packed away all of Mom's photos, her knickknacks, everything that made the house feel like home. "We need to make room for our new family," she chirped, ignoring my glare as she shoved another box of Mom's things into the attic. I retreated to my room, clutching the few photos of Mom I'd managed to save. As I sat there, surrounded by the last remnants of my mother's presence, I made a silent promise: I won't let them erase Mom. Life in what used to be my home became increasingly unbearable. Dad and Candy settled into a lifestyle of lazy indulgence that made my stomach turn. They never worked a day, content to live off the rent from Candy's apartment and the monthly allowance that came into my account, money Mom had left for my care. "See, Robin?" Dad would say, sprawled on the couch with a beer in hand. "This is the good life. No need to work ourselves to death like your mother did." Candy was no better. She'd spend hours online shopping, boxes of clothes and makeup arriving almost daily. "We deserve nice things," she'd say, modeling yet another new dress. Meanwhile, I was growing out of my clothes, my shoes falling apart. When I'd ask for money for new ones, Dad would scowl. "Christ, Robin, do you ever stop growing? Do you know how expensive it is to raise a teenager?" They'd go on lavish vacations, leaving me behind with Aunt Lisa and Uncle Mark. Part of me was relieved to escape the toxic atmosphere at home, but another part felt the sting of rejection. As my 16th birthday approached, I realized I couldn't rely on Dad for anything anymore. I needed my own money, my own independence. That's when I saw the help wanted sign in the window of Joe's coffee shop. That first shift was brutal. My feet ached, my arms burned from carrying trays, and I went home smelling like coffee grounds and dish soap. But I felt a spark of pride I hadn't experienced in years. When I got my first paycheck, I almost cried. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd earned it. "What's this?" Dad asked one day, noticing my new phone. "Where'd you get the money for that?" "I got a job," I said, bracing for his reaction. He snorted. "A job? What do you need a job for?" "We provide everything you need." I bit back a bitter laugh. They provided the bare minimum, spending most of my money on themselves. But I just shrugged. I wanted some extra cash. As the months went by, I worked every shift I could get. I saved every penny, hiding the money in a locked box under a loose floorboard in my room. Slowly, I built up a wardrobe of clothes that actually fit, bought school supplies without having to beg, treated myself to small luxuries like books and art supplies. More importantly, I was building something else: confidence, independence, and a burning determination to take control of my life. As I approached my 18th birthday, a sense of anticipation filled me. Freedom was so close I could almost taste it. But life, as I'd learned, had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. It started with the sound of hammering and drilling. I came home from school one day to find the house in chaos, with workers tramping in and out. "What's going on?" I asked, dodging a man carrying a bucket of paint. Candy waddled over, her face flushed with excitement. She grabbed my hands, her eyes sparkling. "Oh, Robin, we have wonderful news. We're having a baby." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad appeared behind her, grinning from ear to ear. "Isn't it great, kiddo? You're going to be a big sister." I forced a smile, feeling more alone than ever. "Yeah, great." As the weeks passed, I watched as they transformed the house. New furniture arrived, walls were repainted, and baby items started appearing everywhere. I felt like a ghost in my own home, invisible and unwanted. Then, a month before my 18th birthday, everything fell apart. I came home from school, exhausted after a long shift at the coffee shop, to find the door to my room closed. A cute little sign hung on it, reading "Baby's Room" in pastel letters. "Dad? Candy?" I called out, a sense of dread filling me. They appeared from the living room, Candy's pregnant belly leading the way. Dad had a strange look on his face, a mix of satisfaction and determination. "Robin," he said, his voice oddly formal. "Candy and I have been talking. We need your room for the nursery. We think it's best if you move out." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Move out? But, where am I supposed to go? Candy bustled forward, shoving a suitcase into my hands. "Don't worry, I packed your things myself. You should thank me, really. I made sure to include all your important stuff." I opened the suitcase, seeing a jumble of clothes and a few personal items. Everything else, my books, my art supplies, the mementos of Mom, were gone. But this is my home," I stammered, tears welling up in my eyes. Dad's face hardened. "Not anymore. It's time for you to grow up, Robin." I fled, suitcase in hand, tears streaming down my face. I found myself at Aunt Lisa's doorstep, sobbing as I told her what happened. Aunt Lisa's face turned stormy. Those. She took a deep breath, visibly calming herself. "Don't worry, sweetie. You'll stay with us. This isn't over." She marched to the phone and called her lawyer, explaining the situation in rapid-fire words. I sat on the couch, feeling numb as she talked. Finally, she hung up and turned to me, a fierce light in her eyes. "Robin, listen to me. That house? It's yours. Your mother left it to you, remember? You can't officially manage it until you're 18, but in 1 month, you'll be able to do whatever you want with it." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. So they can't just kick me out? Aunt Lisa shook her head. "No, they can't. And once you're 18, you can kick them out." For the first time in years, I felt a smile, a real, genuine smile, spread across my face. 1 month, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Just 1 more month. As I settled into Aunt Lisa's guest room that night, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, hurt, but also a growing sense of determination. Dad and Candy thought they'd won, that they'd finally gotten rid of me. But they had no idea what was coming. The morning of my 18th birthday dawned bright and clear. I woke up feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness, knowing that today was the day everything would change. Uncle Mark drove Aunt Lisa and me to the house, my house. As we pulled up, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. We marched up to the front door, and I knocked loudly, my heart pounding in my chest. After a moment, the door swung open. Dad stood there, his face darkening when he saw us. Behind him, Candy waddled into view, her pregnant belly even bigger than I remembered. "What are you doing here?" Dad demanded, not even acknowledging that it was my birthday. I straightened my shoulders, looking him directly in the eye. "I'm 18 today, Dad. Or did you forget?" He scowled. "That doesn't explain why you're here." Without a word, I handed him the envelope containing the eviction notice. His face turned red as he read it, his hands shaking with anger. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. "It's an eviction notice," I said calmly. "You have 1 month to vacate the premises." Candy burst into tears. "You can't do this," she wailed. "I'm due in a few weeks." "Where are we supposed to go?" I felt a twinge of guilt, but I pushed it aside. "You have an apartment, don't you? The one you've been renting out? You won't be homeless." They started shouting then, calling me cruel, ungrateful, a monster. I stood my ground, Aunt Lisa and Uncle Mark flanking me supportively. "We're not leaving," Dad yelled. "This is our home." I stepped forward, pushing past them into the house. "No, it's not, it's my home. And if you won't leave voluntarily, I'll have no choice but to involve the police." Dad sputtered, "I put money into this place. All the renovations. With Mom's money," I reminded him. "You haven't spent a dime of your own." He lunged forward, looking like he might actually hit me, but Uncle Mark stepped between us. Dad backed down immediately, the fight going out of him. Candy, still sobbing, tugged on Dad's arm. "John, what are we going to do? The tenants in my apartment won't be out for a month." I shrugged, feeling a coldness I didn't know I possessed. "That sounds like a you problem. But I'll honor the law. You have 1 month from today, not a day more." We left them standing there, shocked and angry. As we drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life. The month following my 18th birthday was a war of attrition. Dad and Candy, bitter about their impending eviction, did everything they could to make my life miserable. They'd accidentally break dishes, leaving shards for me to clean up. I'd come home to find walls freshly stained with paint splatters, always small enough to be deemed accidental. The house I'd grown up in, the home my mother had lovingly cared for, was becoming a battlefield. "Oops," Candy would say with faux innocence, after knocking over yet another vase. "Pregnancy makes me so clumsy." I gritted my teeth and endured, counting down the days until I could reclaim my space. Then, one day before their month was up, Candy went into labor. I watched from my window as Dad rushed her to the car, speeding off to the hospital. A plan formed in my mind. I spent the next few hours in a whirlwind of activity. I packed up their belongings, every shirt, every knick-knack, every reminder of their presence. I lugged boxes to the garage, filling it to the brim. Then, I called a locksmith to change the locks. As night fell, I heard a car pull up. Angry voices filled the air, followed by pounding on the door. "Robin, open this door right now," Dad's voice boomed. I stood on the other side, heart racing but resolve firm. "Your month is up. You need to leave." "Are you insane?" he shouted. "We have a newborn baby. You can't do this." Candy's wails joined the cacophony. "Please, Robin, have a heart." For a moment, I hesitated. But then I remembered all the times they'd shown me no mercy, no consideration. "Your things are in the garage," I called out. "I suggest you take them and go to your apartment. If you're not gone in an hour, I'm calling the police." They hurled insults at me, calling me every name in the book. But I stood firm. An hour later, I watched from the window as they loaded their things into their car, Dad red-faced with fury, Candy cradling their newborn and shooting me venomous glares. As they drove away, I felt a complex mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a sense of finality. A chapter of my life had closed, and a new one was beginning. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, erasing every trace of Dad and Candy's presence. I restored Mom's photos to their rightful places, feeling her presence with me as I reclaimed our home. When it came time for college, I made the decision to live in the dorms. I wanted to experience life, to be around people my age after years of isolation. "Are you sure you want to rent out the house?" Aunt Lisa asked as she helped me move into my dorm room. I nodded. "It's the practical thing to do. Plus, I don't think I'm ready to live there full-time yet. Too many memories." She squeezed my shoulder. "I understand. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on the place for you." As I settled into college life, I felt a freedom I'd never known before. I made friends, joined clubs, threw myself into my studies. The weight I'd been carrying for years slowly began to lift. One evening, as I sat in my dorm room studying, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. It was the first I'd heard from him since the eviction. "Candy and I are struggling," it read. "The baby needs things. Can you help us out?" I stared at the message for a long moment, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through me. Then, with a decisive click, I blocked his number. Some might call it cruel, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't heal if I kept that toxicity in my life. Mom had given me the tools to build a better future, and I intended to honor her memory by doing just that. So, I've always been the weird one in my family. You know, the black sheep and all that. I'm Ella Thompson, 29 years old now, but I felt like I don't fit in for pretty much forever. Growing up, I was the oldest kid of Doctors Margaret and Robert Thompson. Yeah, my parents were big shots, but none of that good stuff ever really came my way. Nah, all the perks went to my younger twin brothers, Jack and Oliver. From the second those two popped out, it was like I became invisible to my parents. It started off small, you know? They'd get a bigger piece of cake or a new toy. But as we got older, it got way worse and super obvious. I remember when I turned 10. I'd been dropping hints for ages about this art set I saw in a shop window. Nothing crazy, just a basic kit with some decent paints and brushes. When my birthday rolled around, I was so pumped to open my one present, and what do I find? A freaking math workbook. When I hit my teenage years, the favoritism got even more in your face. Family trips were all about what the boys wanted. If Jack felt like skiing, boom, we're off to the slopes. If Oliver was into surfing that year, hello beach vacation. My ideas? Always got shot down or ignored. College applications. Man, that's a touchy subject. When I was 17, I fell in love with art restoration. I'd hang out at the local museum for hours, bugging the staff with questions about how they fixed up old art. When I brought up studying art restoration in college, you'd think I'd said I wanted to join the circus or something. Art restoration? Mom laughed. Ella, get real. That's not a proper job. Yeah, Ella, Jack butted in with this smug look. Why don't you do something useful, like become a doctor? I'll never forget how proud my parents looked when Jack said that. It was a look I'd never seen them give me. Even though they didn't have my back, I was determined to make it happen. When college acceptance letters started showing up, I was over the moon to find out I'd scored a scholarship to study art restoration. I remember running into the kitchen, waving the letter around like a crazy person. Mom, Dad, I got a scholarship. Mom barely looked up from her medical journal. That's nice, honey. Did you hear the boys got perfect scores on their SATs? The day I left for college was so different from when the twins would leave 2 years later. I packed up my second-hand laptop and thrift store clothes, getting ready to take the bus to my not-so-fancy state school. My parents were too caught up in their work to even give me a ride to the bus station. But there was one person who actually saw me for who I was. My grandma, Elizabeth. She showed up that day, and right before I was about to leave, she pulled me aside. Ella, sweetie, she said, pushing a small envelope into my hand. I'm so proud of you. Don't ever forget that. Inside the envelope was a check, not enough to change my whole life, but enough to make things a bit easier. But more than the money, it was the fact that she actually noticed me that meant everything. So, college was kind of a mixed bag for me. On one hand, I was finally free from always being compared to Jack and Oliver. I could really dive into my studies without feeling like I was in some weird competition for attention. But on the other hand, money was tight. Like, really tight. While I was barely getting by on my scholarship and working part-time jobs, I'd hear about all the fancy stuff my brothers were up to through family calls and social media. Fancy frat parties, spring break trips to crazy places, internships at big-shot hospitals, all paid for by our parents, of course. Time went by, and I threw myself into my studies like crazy. Art restoration became more than just what I wanted to do for a job, it was my escape, my happy place. There was something really satisfying about bringing beauty back to old, forgotten pieces, about showing the hidden potential under layers of neglect and damage. In my last year, I scored an internship at this small but respected museum. It wasn't fancy work, mostly cleaning and organizing stuff, but it was a way in. I was over the moon. When I called home to share the news, my mother's response was exactly what I expected, lukewarm at best. Oh, that's nice, dear, she said, sounding distracted. Did you hear about Jack's research paper? It's being published in a major medical journal. I held back a sigh. That's great, Mom. Listen, I was thinking of coming home for a weekend soon. Maybe we could. Oh, I'm not sure that's a good idea, she cut me off quick. Your father and I are going to be really busy. We're helping the boys with their research papers. You understand, right? As I hung up the phone, I felt that familiar mix of anger and hurt building up in my chest. But this time, there was something else too. A little spark of defiance, of determination. I looked around my tiny dorm room, at the art books piled up on my desk, at the half-finished restoration project taking up most of my floor. This was my world now, one I had built for myself despite everything. Screw them, I muttered to the empty room. I don't need their approval. But even as I said it, a part of me knew it wasn't true. As much as I tried to deny it, a small part of me still wanted my parents to recognize me, still hoped that one day they'd see me for who I really was. So, graduation day came and went without much fuss from my family. My big moment was marked by a quick dinner at some chain restaurant. "So, Ella, what's next?" Dad asked, barely looking up from his menu. I sat up straight, trying to sound confident. "I actually got a job offer, in one of the museums in New York." Dad frowned. "I don't know, Ella. New York is expensive. How much does this job pay?" I felt my face get hot as I mumbled the not-so-impressive starting salary. The disappointment on their faces was super obvious. The rest of the dinner was a blur of thinly veiled criticism and comparisons to Jack and Oliver's academic awesomeness. As we were leaving the restaurant, Grandma Elizabeth pulled me aside. "Don't let them dim your light, my dear," she whispered, pressing a small envelope into my hand. "Go to New York. Chase your dreams." Inside the envelope was a check, enough to cover my first month's rent in the city. I hugged her tight, trying not to cry. The next few years were crazy. I threw myself into my work, slowly but surely making a name for myself in the world of art restoration. It was during this time that I met Noah. Noah was a struggling graphic designer with a nice smile and this infectious passion for his work. We clicked right away over our shared love of art and our experiences as underdogs in our fields. After dating for a while, I decided it was time for Noah to meet my family. From the second we sat down, it was clear my parents had other ideas. They bombarded Noah with questions, each one more pointed than the last. "So, Noah," Dad started, trying to sound casual but failing, "what exactly are your long-term career prospects?" Noah shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. "Well, I'm building my client base. It takes time, but I'm making progress." Mom jumped in. "And your current income? Is it enough to support a family?" I felt my face get hot. "Mom, that's not." "It's okay, Ella," Noah said, squeezing my hand under the table. "I'm not where I want to be money-wise yet, Dr. Thompson, but I'm working hard to get there." The interrogation kept going throughout dinner. With each question, I could see Noah's confidence taking a hit, and my own anger rising. As we were leaving, Mom pulled me aside. "Ella, honey, I know you think you care for this boy, but you need to be realistic. You've already chosen a challenging career path. Don't make it worse by attaching yourself to someone with no real future." "Mom," I hissed, shocked at how blunt she was being. Dad joined in. "Your mother's right, Ella. You need to think about your future. This Noah seems nice enough, but is he really good enough for you? You could do so much better." I stood there, speechless, as years of pent-up frustration threatened to explode. How dare they judge Noah? How dare they once again dismiss my choices? So, as Noah and I started planning our wedding, reality hit us hard. Our combined savings were pretty pathetic, barely enough for a simple ceremony. One night, after staring at budget spreadsheets for hours, I decided to bring it up with my parents. Maybe they'd want to chip in. "Mom, Dad," I started hesitantly during our weekly phone call. "Noah and I have set a date for the wedding. We're trying to keep costs down, but I was wondering if maybe you'd like to help out a little? Even just with the planning?" The silence on the other end of the line was so long and awkward. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice cold as ice. "Ella, you're an adult now. If you've chosen to marry this person, then you need to handle the consequences yourself." I hung up feeling like crap, but not really surprised. Once again, Grandma Elizabeth swooped in to save the day. When I told her about the situation, she didn't hesitate to help. "My dear," she said, her voice warm over the phone, "I may not be able to give you the wedding of your dreams, but I want to help make your day special." She sent over some money that, while not a ton, made a huge difference to our plans. The wedding day arrived, and I had this mix of excitement and nerves churning in my stomach. The community center we'd rented was simple, but looked nice, decorated with wildflowers and twinkly lights. Our small group of friends had pitched in, helping with everything from the decorations to the homemade cake. As I walked down the makeshift aisle, Noah's face lit up with a smile that made all the struggle worth it. For a moment, I forgot about everything else, the money stress, my family being jerks, and just soaked in the love radiating from his eyes. The bubble burst as soon as I caught sight of my family. Mom and Dad sat stiffly in the front row, looking bored and disgusted. I overheard Mom muttering to Dad about the tacky decorations and cheap food. Jack and Oliver were even worse, snickering in the corner and constantly on their phones. I tried to ignore them, focusing instead on our vows and the supportive faces of our friends. It wasn't until the next day that I realized just how cruel they could be. I woke up to a ton of notifications on my phone. Jack and Oliver had gone on social media, posting a bunch of unflattering photos from the wedding. "Congrats to our big sis on her special day," read one caption under a blurry photo of Noah and me cutting our homemade cake. "Nothing says true love like a dollar store wedding." Another post showed a picture of the buffet table next to a photo of a fancy meal from some high-end restaurant. Ella's wedding versus our average Tuesday lunch. Guess which one's which? The comments section was a war zone. Some relatives were shocked at the brothers' behavior. "This is completely unacceptable. You should be ashamed of yourselves," wrote Aunt Sarah. But others seemed to think it was funny. Savage but true. "That wedding looked like a homeless convention," commented our cousin Tim. I felt sick reading through the comments. But what really broke my heart was seeing my parents' responses. Instead of telling their sons off, they were actually encouraging them. Mom had commented, "Boys will be boys. It's just a bit of harmless fun." I didn't call them and demand an apology. I just decided to forget about them for a while. So, 6 months after our wedding, it was time for the annual Thompson family reunion. Even though I was worried about it, Noah thought I should go, hoping it might be a chance to clear the air. Man, were we wrong. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I managed to keep it together for the first hour, making polite conversation and avoiding my immediate family as much as I could. But then I overheard Jack bragging about his latest fancy vacation, paid for by our parents, of course. Something inside me just snapped. "Must be nice," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "To have mommy and daddy bankroll your entire life." The room went dead quiet. Jack stared at me, his mouth hanging open. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what it means," I shot back, years of pent-up frustration finally boiling over. "You and Oliver have been handed everything on a silver platter, while I've had to fight for every scrap of recognition or support." Mom stepped forward, her face red with anger. "Now, Ella, you're being ridiculous. We've always treated you children equally." I let out a bitter laugh. "Equally? Are you kidding me? Let's talk about equal, shall we?" I started counting off on my fingers. Private school tuition for the boys, public school for me. Brand new cars for their 16th birthdays, nothing for mine. And let's not forget the crowning achievement, $300,000 for their Ivy League medical educations, while I had to scrape by on scholarships and loans. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop, all eyes on our family's dirty laundry being aired so publicly. Mom's voice was ice cold when she spoke. "If you're so obsessed with money, Ella, perhaps you should have married someone rich instead of your poor husband." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Noah, who had been silently supporting me, stiffened beside me. "How dare you?" I hissed, feeling tears in my eyes. "Noah is worth 10 of you. He actually loves me for who I am, not for how I can make him look good to his country club friends." The reunion turned into total chaos. Everyone was throwing accusations, bringing up old grudges, and years of resentment came pouring out. In the middle of all the shouting, a strong voice cut through the noise. "Enough." Everyone turned to see Grandma Elizabeth standing up, her usually kind face looking stern and angry. "I have watched this family tear itself apart for years, and I won't stand for it anymore," she declared. "Margaret, Robert, your treatment of Ella has been shameful. And you boys," she turned to Jack and Oliver, "your cruelty towards your sister is unforgivable." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Mom, never one to back down, spat out, "Mother, you don't understand. Ella has always been difficult, always causing problems." "No, Margaret," Grandma interrupted. "The only problem here is your blatant favoritism and inability to see the damage you've done." I looked around the room, at the shocked faces of my relatives, at my grandmother's resolute stance, at my parents' anger, and my brother's smug expressions. In that moment, something inside me broke and then came back together differently. "I'm done," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm done trying to win your approval, done trying to be part of this toxic family. Noah and I are leaving, and don't bother trying to contact us." The months that followed were tough. Noah was my rock through it all. He held me when the sadness hit, celebrated the small victories, and never once made me feel guilty for the family drama I'd brought into our lives. So, life has this weird way of throwing you for a loop when you least expect it. It all kicked off with a phone call. Noah had been working his butt off for weeks, putting everything he had into a pitch for this big-time client. When he answered the phone that sunny Tuesday morning, I could tell from the look on his face that something major had gone down. "We got it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ella, we got the contract." The next few months were crazy. Noah's little design firm blew up overnight, the fancy client opening doors we never thought we'd see. Suddenly, we weren't just scraping by, we were rolling in it. But with our new success came this unexpected complication. My phone started blowing up with notifications, friend requests from family members I'd long since blocked, messages from distant relatives suddenly wanting to catch up. And then, the call I'd been dreading. "Ella, sweetheart." My mother's voice, sickly sweet, came through the line. "We've heard the wonderful news about Noah's business. We always knew you two would make it." The bullshit kept coming. My father got on the line, talking about how proud they were, how they'd always believed in us. I listened in stunned silence, getting angrier with each lie. "We'd love to see you," Mom chirped. "Maybe we could all have dinner, celebrate your success as a family?" That snapped me out of it. "As a family?" I repeated, my voice hard. "We haven't been a family for a long time, and that's not going to change just because our bank account has." I stuck to my guns. When my parents showed up at our door out of the blue, I didn't let them in. When they sent fancy gifts, I sent them right back unopened. Instead, Noah and I focused on building the life we'd always wanted. We worked hard, saved smart, and eventually found ourselves signing the papers for a beautiful apartment right in the middle of the city. Excited to share our happiness, I posted a photo on social media. It was a simple shot, Noah and I, keys in hand, standing in front of our new home. Next to it was a picture from our most recent visit with Grandma Elizabeth, her proud smile beaming at the camera. "New beginnings and old love," I captioned it. Grateful for those who've been there through it all. New home, family. As I hit post, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. This was my family now, Noah, Grandma Elizabeth, and the friends who had stood by us through thick and thin. We had built this life for ourselves, despite the odds, despite all the people who said we couldn't do it. The soft evening light was coming through the windows of our new apartment as I was busy in the kitchen, getting dinner ready for Noah and Grandma Elizabeth. It was our first real family dinner in our new place, and I wanted everything to be just right. The sudden, aggressive pounding on the front door shattered that peace in an instant. "Ella, open up. We know you're in there." My blood ran cold. I'd know those voices anywhere, Jack and Oliver. Before I could even react, the door burst open. My brothers stormed in, their faces twisted with anger. I barely had time to see Noah jumping to his feet before Jack was in my face, jabbing an accusing finger at my chest. "You manipulative little bitch," he snarled. "We always knew you were playing the long game, but this? This is low, even for you." I stumbled back, shocked by how much venom was in his voice. "What are you talking about?" Oliver laughed, and it was a harsh, ugly sound. "Don't play dumb, Ella. We saw your little social media post. Showing off your new apartment, posing with Grandma. You think we can't put two and two together? It hit me what they were thinking. You think Grandma bought us this apartment? We know she did, Jack spat. You've been playing the poor, neglected child for years, worming your way into her good graces. And now you've manipulated her into making you the sole heir. I felt a surge of anger, straightening my spine. You have no idea what you're talking about. Noah and I bought this apartment ourselves. With our own money, that we earned. Oliver sneered, his eyes darting around the room. Right, sure you did. Where is the old bat anyway? Hiding her away so we can't talk sense into her? That crazy old woman should be in a cemetery by now. I can't wait for her to kick the bucket so I can sell her house and live it up. The room fell deadly silent. For a moment, I thought I might have imagined those horrific words. Then, a quiet voice spoke from the doorway of the guest room. So this is how you truly feel about me. All heads turned to see Grandma Elizabeth standing there, her face a mask of shock and disappointment. The color drained from Jack and Oliver's faces as they realized their grandmother had heard every word. Grandma, Jack stammered, we didn't mean. Elizabeth held up a hand, shutting him up. I've heard enough, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I finally understand who truly values me and who sees me as nothing more than a meal ticket. I found my voice, strengthened by my grandmother's presence. I think you both need to leave. Now. For a moment, it looked like they might argue. But one look at Grandma's face, a mixture of hurt and resolve, seemed to deflate them. They slunk towards the door, muttering weak excuses. The aftermath of that crazy evening hit like a storm. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, constantly reminding me of the mess that had blown up. Mom's name popped up on the screen for what felt like the millionth time. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Ella, her voice was sharp, not sounding like a mom at all. You need to fix this. Your grandmother is furious with the boys. You need to smooth things over, tell her it was all a misunderstanding. I let out a bitter laugh. A misunderstanding? They broke into my home and said they couldn't wait for her to die so they could sell her house. How exactly is that a misunderstanding? They didn't mean it, Dad chimed in, apparently on speakerphone. You know how the boys can be. They were just upset. Upset about what? I challenged. That Noah and I bought an apartment with our own money? That Grandma loves me? Mom's voice turned sickly sweet. Sweetheart, we know you've always felt left out. But you need to think about what's best for the family. Your brothers deserve that inheritance. Don't be selfish. Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. Selfish? You're calling me selfish? After years of favoritism, of dismissing my achievements, of treating Noah and me like second-class citizens? And now you have the audacity to demand I give up an inheritance I never even asked for? Now, Ella, Dad started, but I cut him off. No. I'm done. I'm done with the manipulation, the guilt trips, all of it. Don't call me again. Don't text. Don't show up at my door. We're through. Over the next few days, I blocked their numbers, along with Jack and Oliver's. It was painful, like cutting off a diseased limb, but necessary for healing to begin. As the dust settled, I found myself surrounded by a different kind of warmth. Grandma Elizabeth, now fully aware of the family dynamics she had long suspected, became an even more constant presence in our lives. Aunt Sarah, who had reached out after the wedding fiasco, became a regular visitor. I always knew you were special, Ella, she said, hugging me tightly. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. Other relatives, cousins, and distant aunts and uncles who had witnessed my family's mistreatment over the years, reached out with messages of support. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing genuine relationships to flourish where there had once been only obligation. Noah's family, bless them, wrapped me in a blanket of unconditional love. His parents, who had watched from the sidelines as my own family tore me down, went out of their way to make me feel cherished. Noah and I threw ourselves into making our new apartment a home. Each piece of furniture, each photo on the wall, was a testament to the life we were building together, a life founded on mutual respect, support, and love. My name's Elizabeth, and I just turned 17 when my life took a wild turn. Let me paint you a picture of my family. On the surface, we seemed decent enough. Dad worked his ass off, and Mom stayed home. I had a little sister, Amy, who was 12 years younger than me. Dad was a big shop manager at this company that belonged to my maternal grandmother. Grandma was a real go-getter. She started with a chain of laundromats, then expanded into making household chemicals and detergents for laundries. When she decided to retire, she offered the business to Mom. But she wasn't interested. So Dad stepped up and took over the company. That's when things started to get complicated. I remember the day it all went to shit. I was in my room, trying to focus on homework, when I heard Mom screaming at Dad downstairs. "You're nothing but a loser, John. This is my house, my family's business. You should be grateful I even let you run it." Things got worse over the next few weeks. Mom and Dad barely spoke to each other, and when they did, it usually ended in a shouting match. I tried to keep Amy distracted, but even at 5, she knew something was wrong. Then came the day that changed everything. I came home from school to find Dad in the living room, a suitcase at his feet. "Dad?" My voice cracked. "What's going on?" He walked over to me, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I can't stay here anymore. It's not good for anyone." I felt like I couldn't breathe. But what about Amy? What about me? Dad pulled back, his eyes shiny with unshed tears. "I love you both so much. Never forget that. But sometimes love isn't enough." He kissed my forehead, then walked over to Amy, who was watching us with wide, confused eyes. He knelt down, hugging her tightly. "Be good for your big sister, okay, pumpkin?" And just like that, he was gone. The door closed behind him with a finality that left me feeling hollow. Mom came home an hour later. When I told her Dad had left, she didn't seem surprised. She just nodded, like she'd been expecting it. "Good riddance," she muttered. "Mom, I couldn't believe what I was hearing." "How can you say that?" She turned to me, her eyes hard. "Your father cheated on me, Elizabeth. Multiple times. I couldn't take it anymore." That night, as I lay in bed, I could hear Mom on the phone in her room. She was laughing, sounding happier than I'd heard her in months. I wondered who she was talking to, but I was too exhausted to care. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated after Dad left, Mom dropped another bombshell on us. "Girls," she announced one morning over breakfast, "I have some news. I'm getting married." I nearly choked on my cereal. "What? Mom, Dad's only been gone for 2 months." She waved her hand dismissively. "Sometimes, true love comes unexpectedly, Elizabeth. You'll understand when you're older." Robert moved in a week later. He was, okay, I guess. Tall, good-looking in that generic way that makes people say, "Oh, he seems nice." But something about him rubbed me the wrong way from the start. He made an effort with Amy, playing games with her and helping her with her homework. But with me? It was like I barely existed. Meanwhile, changes were happening at the company too. Mom had taken over after Dad left, and she brought Robert in to work with her. They seemed to make a good team, always huddled together, discussing business strategies. I tried to focus on my own life, school, friends, the usual teenage stuff. But it was hard to ignore the nagging feeling that I was becoming invisible in my own family. Things came to a head when Mom and Robert announced they were opening a new branch of the company in another city. "We're moving," Mom told me one evening. "It's a great opportunity for the business. As for you, Robert and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you stay here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Stay here? Without you?" "It's just that the new house won't have much space," she explained hurriedly. "And you're almost done with school." It wouldn't make sense to transfer now, right before your exams. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So where am I supposed to live? On the street? Don't be dramatic, Elizabeth, Mom scolded. You'll stay with your grandmother. She's already agreed to it. I stormed off to my room, slamming the door behind me. As I lay on my bed, hot tears of anger and hurt streaming down my face, I couldn't help but wonder, when did I become such an inconvenience to my own mother? The next few weeks were a blur of packing boxes and tearful goodbyes, not from me, but from Amy, who didn't want to leave her friends. I helped her pack, trying to put on a brave face for her sake. Will you come visit us, Lizzie? She asked, her big brown eyes full of tears. I hugged her tightly. Of course I will, squirt. You can't get rid of me that easily. The day they left, I stood on the porch with Grandma, watching as the moving van pulled away. Mom gave me a quick hug, Robert nodded awkwardly, and then they were gone, taking Amy with them. Living with Grandma wasn't as bad as I'd feared. She was cool in her own way, giving me space when I needed it, but always there with a cup of tea and a listening ear when I wanted to talk. Still, it wasn't home. My 18th birthday rolled around faster than I expected. I woke up that morning feeling weird. Like I should be excited, but all I felt was empty. Mom called, of course. Happy birthday, sweetie. Her voice was bright, almost too cheery. I'm sorry we can't be there. Work's just crazy right now. We'll celebrate when we visit next month, okay? I knew we wouldn't. They hadn't visited once since they left. Sure, Mom. Sounds great. Grandma must have sensed my mood, because she went all out. She let me invite a few friends over, ordered my favorite food, even baked a cake herself. For a few hours, I almost forgot about everything else. The next morning, Grandma called me into her home office. She had the serious look on her face that made my stomach clench. Sit down, Elizabeth, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. We need to talk. Oh God, I thought. She's kicking me out. Where am I gonna go? But then she smiled, reached into her desk drawer, and pulled out a small folder. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Open it. I did, and nearly dropped it when I realized what I was looking at. Grandma, is this? She nodded, her eyes twinkling. The company is yours now, Elizabeth. I see potential in you, kiddo. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I know you'll do right by the business. But Mom and Robert, they're running it now. Grandma's face hardened slightly. They're running a branch. The main company, the heart of it all, that's yours now. I sat there, stunned. Me, barely 18, owner of a multi-million-dollar company? It felt like a dream. Or a nightmare. I don't know what to say. Grandma reached across the desk, squeezing my hand. You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll give it your all. I nodded, still in shock. I will. I promise. She sat back, satisfied. Good. Now, I've got one more piece of advice for you, and I want you to listen carefully. I leaned in, hanging on her every word. Call your father. There's more to that story than you know. Talk to him. Take him on as a consultant if you want. But hear him out. It took me a week to work up the courage to call Dad. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. When I saw him, my heart clenched. He looked older, tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. There was an awkward silence. Then, suddenly, everything came pouring out. The divorce, Mom's remarriage, the move, Grandma's gift. Dad listened, his face a mix of emotions. When I finished, he took a deep breath. Lizzie, there's something you need to know about the divorce. And then he told me everything. How Mom had never respected him, constantly nagging and putting him down. How she called him a loser, made him feel worthless. How, after one particularly bad fight, he'd gotten drunk and made the biggest mistake of his life. I cheated on her, he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. Once. I regretted it immediately, but your mother, she used it against me. Threatened to sue, to take everything. She demanded I leave, give her all the property, leave you kids. She even wanted alimony. I sat there, stunned. This didn't sound like the mother I knew. Or thought I knew. Why didn't you fight it? I asked. Dad's eyes met mine, full of sadness and love. Because of you and Amy. I didn't want you to go through a messy, public divorce. I thought it would be easier this way. As we talked, I felt a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my dad back. Before we left, I took a deep breath and asked, Dad, how would you feel about helping me with the company? As a consultant? The smile that spread across his face was answer enough. The months flew by in a whirlwind of studying, exams, and late-night cram sessions. Before I knew it, I was standing on the stage at my high school graduation, diploma in hand. Grandma was in the audience, beaming with pride. Mom and Robert were conspicuously absent, but I'd learned not to expect much from that quarter. As summer rolled in, I threw myself into college applications. With Grandma's encouragement and Dad's long-distance support, I set my sights high. When the acceptance letters started rolling in, I could hardly believe it. But the real shocker came when I got the financial aid package from my top choice. Full ride, I breathed, staring at the letter in disbelief. Grandma hooped, pulling me into a bear hug. I knew you could do it, kiddo. All those late nights and competitions paid off. I'd chosen to major in business management. It seemed like the smart choice, given that I now had a company to run. The idea still felt surreal, but I was determined to make Grandma proud. To celebrate my college acceptance, Grandma insisted on throwing a little party. Just the two of us, some fancy takeout, and a bottle of sparkling cider. Grandma wasn't about to let me drink champagne, even if I was legally an adult now. We were halfway through our meal when the doorbell rang. Grandma frowned, clearly not expecting anyone. I'll get it, I said, putting down my fork. I opened the door and felt my stomach drop. There, looking annoyed and impatient, stood my mother and Robert. Before I could say anything, they brushed past me into the house. Mom didn't bother with pleasantries. Mother, we need to talk about the company. Now. I watched, stunned, as Mom launched into a tirade. She didn't even glance my way, didn't ask about graduation or college. It was like I wasn't even there. Why can't we access the main accounts, she demanded. And why are you blocking the transfer of capital to our subsidiary? Grandma's eyes narrowed. Because it's not your decision to make anymore, Helen. The company belongs to Elizabeth now. She's the one who'll decide its future and manage its finances. The room went dead silent. The tension in the room was palpable after Grandma's revelation about the company. I watched as a series of emotions flashed across Mom's face, shock, anger, and then, calculation. Suddenly, her entire demeanor changed. Elizabeth, sweetheart, she said, her voice soft and sickly sweet. I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us? I blinked, caught off guard by this sudden change. Mom stepped closer, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I instinctively stepped back. We've settled in so nicely in the new city. We have a beautiful house, and there's a room just for you. We could set up a desk, get you a new computer for your studies and work. No, Mom, I said, my voice steady. I'm happy here. I have my friends, my school. And Grandma needs me. Mom's smile faltered for a second before she rallied. Well, if that's the issue, we could always move back here. We could live in our old house, just like before. Wouldn't that be nice? I shook my head. It's not about the house, Mom. It's everything. I saw the anger building in her eyes, barely contained. Before she could speak, I decided to ask the question that had been burning inside me for months. Mom, why did you really divorce Dad? She stiffened, caught off guard. Well, your father, he cheated on me. Multiple times. I was tired of it. He abandoned us for his mistress, didn't even pay alimony. That's not true, I said. Dad told me everything. There was only one time, and it was because of how you treated him. He didn't abandon us, you kicked him out. And he's been paying alimony regularly. Mom's face contorted with rage. How dare you? You ungrateful little brat. You have no right to meddle in my personal life. Everything here belongs to me, and I decide who lives where. Grandma, who had been quietly watching this exchange, finally stepped forward. Her voice was calm but filled with a steel I'd never heard before. That's quite enough, Helen, she said. You seem to have forgotten a few key points. This house? The company? They belong to me, not you. I gave the company to Elizabeth because I trust her judgment far more than I trust yours right now. I think it's time for you to leave. I watched, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest, as Grandma firmly ushered Mom and Robert out of the house. The door closed behind them with a final sounding click. As we stood there, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief wash over me. I'd lost something today, the last illusions I had about my mother. But I'd gained something too. A certainty about my path forward, and the knowledge that I wasn't alone on it. What now? I asked, my voice muffled against Grandma's shoulder. She pulled back, giving me a small smile. Now we get back to celebrating your college acceptance. And tomorrow, we start planning for your future, your real future, not the one your mother tried to force on you. The morning after the confrontation with Mom and Robert, I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. Curious, I crept down the stairs and peeked into the living room. To my surprise, I saw Dad sitting on the couch, deep in conversation with Grandma. As I sat down next to them, Grandma explained why she'd called Dad over. I've been thinking about Amy, she said. Your mother, well, I'm not sure she's in the best position to care for her right now. I've suggested that your father seek custody of Amy. I felt a surge of hope. Really? Dad, are you going to do it? He ran a hand through his hair, looking both nervous and determined. Yeah, I am. It won't be easy, but Amy deserves better than what she's getting right now. I couldn't help it, I threw my arms around him. Thank you, Dad. As we pulled apart, Grandma cleared her throat. There's more, she said. I've hired a private investigator to look into your mother and Robert's affairs. Over the next few weeks, life fell into a strange new rhythm. I started my college classes, throwing myself into my studies with a determination I'd never felt before. Dad came over regularly, and we worked on rebuilding our relationship. It felt good, having him back in my life. Then, about 3 weeks after that morning conversation, Grandma called us both over. Her face was grave as we sat down. The investigator's report came in, she said without preamble. And, well, it's worse than we thought. She laid out the facts, each one hitting like a punch to the gut. Mom had been cheating on Dad for years, long before the divorce. Her affair with Robert had started while she was still married to Dad. There were hotel receipts, records of expensive gifts, all painting a damning picture. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Robert is a con man, Grandma said, her voice hard. He's done this before, seducing wealthy women, convincing them to move assets around, and then disappearing with the money. I felt sick. So when they wanted to move the company's capital? Grandma nodded. Exactly. He was planning to steal it all and run. We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Grandma said that we needed to confront Mom with the truth. The meeting was set for the next day. Mom arrived at Grandma's house looking annoyed and impatient. Her expression changed to one of surprise when she saw Dad there too. What followed was one of the most painful conversations I've ever been part of. Grandma laid out all the evidence, the affair, Robert's history of fraud, his plans to steal from the company. With each revelation, I watched my mother's face, hoping to see some sign of remorse or understanding. Instead, all I saw was denial. This is ridiculous, Mom sputtered. Robert loves me. He would never. You're all just jealous of our happiness. Dad tried to reason with her. Helen, please. Look at the evidence. Think about Amy. Is this really the kind of man you want around our daughter? But Mom wouldn't hear it. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. I don't have to listen to this. Robert is a good man, and I trust him completely. You're all just trying to ruin my life. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As we sat there, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of what was sure to be a long, difficult battle. But looking at Dad and Grandma, I knew I wasn't facing it alone. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Dad, with Grandma's unwavering support and her lawyer's expertise, filed for custody of Amy. I tried to stay focused on my studies, but it was hard not to get caught up in the drama unfolding around me. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and I insisted on being there. The proceedings were grueling. Mom's lawyer tried to paint Dad as an absent father, but our lawyer came prepared. He presented evidence of Dad's consistent alimony payments, his attempts to stay in touch with us, and the stability of his current living situation. Then came the bombshell, the private investigator's report on Robert's fraudulent past and their plans to embezzle from the company. I watched Mom's face as the evidence was presented. She looked shocked, then angry, then lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. When the judge announced his decision, granting Dad full custody of Amy, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Amy would be safe, sadness that it had come to this. As we left the courthouse, Amy in Dad's arms, Mom approached us. "This isn't over," she hissed, her eyes blazing with fury. Grandma stepped between us. "Yes, Helen, it is. Go home." The hits kept coming for Mom after that. The judge ordered her to pay child support to Dad for Amy. It was a reversal that clearly shocked her. She'd always assumed she'd be the one receiving support, not paying it. I threw myself into my studies and learning about the company, trying to distance myself from the ongoing drama. But it was hard to ignore the satisfaction I felt when I heard that Robert had left Mom, running off with another woman and a significant chunk of Mom's personal savings. It was a crisp autumn evening when Dad called me, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Your mother showed up at my place today," he said. "She wanted to reconcile. Said she'd made a mistake, that she wanted us to be a family again." My heart clenched. Part of me, a small, childish part, wanted him to say yes. Wanted our family back the way it used to be. But I knew too much now. We'd all been through too much. I told her no, Dad said firmly. I told her that ship had sailed a long time ago, and that I wouldn't put you or Amy through that again. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Good," I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. "You deserve better, Dad. We all do." There was a pause, and when Dad spoke again, I could hear the smile in his voice. "When did you get so wise, Lizzie?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "I learned from the best." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my room at Grandma's house. My textbooks were spread out on the desk, next to a stack of reports from the company. Photos of me with Dad and Amy smiled back at me from the bulletin board. This wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself a year ago. It wasn't perfect, there was still so much to figure out, so many challenges ahead. But it was real. It was mine. I thought about Mom, suddenly alone after all her scheming and manipulations. I felt a twinge of pity, but it was overshadowed by a sense of justice. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As for me? I had a family that loved me, a company to run, and a future full of possibilities. It wasn't the path I'd expected, but standing at the threshold of my new life, I realized something important. Time flies when you're juggling college and a multi-million-dollar company. Before I knew it, I was halfway through my degree, buried in textbooks and financial reports. Weekdays were a blur of lectures and late-night study sessions. But weekends? Those were sacred. Every Friday, I'd pack a bag and head home to Dad and Amy. "Lizzie," Amy would squeal, tackling me with a hug the moment I walked in. At 10, she was all gangly limbs and endless energy. Dad would emerge from the kitchen, usually wearing an apron. "Just in time for dinner," he'd say with a grin. Those weekends became my anchor. We'd eat together, Amy chattering about school, Dad and I discussing the company. After Amy went to bed, we'd often stay up late, poring over business strategies. Sundays usually found us at Grandma's. She'd cook up a storm, filling the house with the smell of roast chicken and apple pie. After lunch, we'd sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. "I always knew you had it in you, Elizabeth," Grandma would say, squeezing my hand. As graduation approached, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Dad was true to his word, running the company with skill while preparing me to take over. "I'm ready to hand over the reins whenever you are," he told me one evening. I hugged him tight. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Life wasn't perfect. There were challenges ahead, decisions to be made, a company to run. But as I looked at my little family, Dad, Amy, Grandma, I knew we could face anything together. At 34, I'm Monica, a successful journalist at a top fashion magazine and a well-known fashion blogger. As I sit in my office, surrounded by racks of designer clothes and stacks of glossy magazines, I can't help but feel a sense of pride. I've worked hard to get here, and every late night and early morning has been worth it. My phone buzzes with a notification. It's an email from my editor. "Monica, great job on the latest piece. The readers are loving it. Keep it up." I smile to myself. This is what I live for, the rush of creating content that resonates with people, the thrill of being at the forefront of fashion trends. But it wasn't always like this. My mind drifts back to my childhood, to the house where I grew up. It was a nice house in the suburbs, but for me, it was more of a battlefield than a home. My sister, Sarah, is 7 years older than me. From the day I was born, she saw me as competition. I remember her constant need for attention, her jealousy, her manipulations. It's funny how some wounds never truly heal, even after all these years. There was this one time, when I was about 8. Sarah was 15 and had invited her friends over. I was in my room, reading a fashion magazine. Suddenly, I heard a crash from downstairs. My heart sank. I knew, somehow, that this wouldn't end well for me. I crept down the stairs to find my mother's favorite vase in pieces on the floor. Sarah and her friends were standing around it, looking guilty. But then Sarah's eyes locked with mine, and I saw a familiar glint in them. "Monica," she shrieked. "What have you done?" I stood there, mouth agape, as Sarah spun a tale of how I had been running wild through the house and knocked over the vase. Her friends, not wanting to get in trouble, nodded along. But I didn't, I started to say, but my parents had already made up their minds. "Monica, how could you be so careless?" my mother scolded. "You know how much I loved that vase." "You're grounded for a month," my father added. "And no pocket money until you've paid for a new vase." That night, as I lay in bed, I made a promise to myself. One day, I'd have my own place, my own life, far away from Sarah's shadow. And here I am now, living that promise. I've got my own house, bought with a mortgage I'm proud to pay off each month. It's my sanctuary, my piece of peace and quiet. As I wrap up my latest article on fall fashion trends, my mind wanders back to the day Sarah got married. I was 15, and I remember feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. Finally, I thought, I'd have some peace in my life. The wedding itself was a lavish affair. Sarah looked stunning in her white gown, but I couldn't help noticing the smug look she threw my way during the ceremony. A year after the wedding, Sarah had a daughter, my niece, Lily. As she grew, I found myself spending more and more time with her. Sarah seemed all too happy to pawn her off on me, preferring to spend her time gossiping with friends or scrolling endlessly on her phone. "Monica, can you take Lily this weekend?" Sarah's voice crackled through the phone. It was a familiar request. "I've got plans." I sighed, knowing full well that plans probably meant another meeting with chatty friends. "Sure, Sarah. I'd love to spend time with Lily." That weekend, I took Lily to a new children's entertainment complex that had just opened up in town. Her eyes lit up as we entered, taking in the colorful play areas and exciting activities. "Aunt Monica, look," Lily squealed, pointing at a giant slide. "Can we go on that?" I laughed, her excitement infectious. "Of course we can, sweetie. We can do whatever you want today." As I dropped Lily off at home that evening, I overheard Sarah arguing with her husband, Mason. Their voices were muffled, but I caught snippets about Sarah's frequent absences and her disinterest in family life. I quickly ushered Lily inside, not wanting her to hear the argument. But as I turned to leave, Mason caught my arm. "Monica," he said, his voice strained. "I don't know what to do anymore. Sarah's never home, and when she is, she's glued to her phone. It's like Lily and I don't even exist to her." "I'm sorry," I said, not knowing what else to say. "If there's anything I can do to help with Lily, just let me know." He nodded gratefully, and I left, feeling a mix of emotions. Anger at Sarah for neglecting her family, worry for Lily, and a strange sense of vindication. All those years of Sarah tormenting me, and now her true colors were showing to everyone else too. The day everything fell apart started like any other. I was at a cafe with my friends when my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice tense and brittle. "Monica, you need to come home. Now." I arrived at my parents' house to find chaos. Sarah was sobbing on the couch, mascara streaking down her face. My father was pacing, red-faced with anger. And in the corner, looking shell-shocked, was Sarah's husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, as I would learn. "He caught me," Sarah wailed between sobs. With her lover," Mason spat out. "In our own bed." I stood there, stunned. Despite knowing about Sarah's indiscretions, seeing the fallout was something else entirely. And then, as always, Sarah's eyes locked onto me. "This is your fault," she shrieked, pointing an accusing finger. "If you hadn't been so perfect, if you hadn't taken up so much of Mom and Dad's attention, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere for love." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even now, faced with the consequences of her own actions, Sarah was trying to blame me. "That's enough, Sarah," I said, my voice cold. "You made your choices. Don't you dare try to pin this on me." My parents, predictably, rushed to Sarah's defense. "Monica, how can you be so heartless?" my mother cried. "Your sister is hurting." I looked at them, these people who had always taken Sarah's side, who had never believed me when I told them about her cruelty. In that moment, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. "I'm done," I said quietly. "I'm done with the drama, the accusations, the constant favoritism. I'm moving out." My parents protested, but their words fell on deaf ears. I was 22, fresh out of college, and ready to start my own life. Within a week, I had found a small apartment across town and moved out of my childhood home. The next few years were a whirlwind. I landed an entry-level job at a fashion magazine, throwing myself into work with a passion born of determination to succeed on my own terms. Nights were spent poring over fashion blogs, learning everything I could about the industry. All the while, I kept my distance from my family. Sarah and Lily had moved back in with our parents, but I tried to go there as little as possible. Still, I made an effort to stay in touch with Lily. We'd meet for ice cream or trips to the park, away from the watchful eyes of Sarah and my parents. Lily was growing into a sweet, thoughtful girl, so different from her mother that it sometimes took my breath away. As the years rolled by, my career took off like a rocket. At 34, I found myself in a position I'd only dreamed of as a fresh-faced college graduate. Senior journalist at a top fashion magazine, my byline recognized by industry insiders and fashion enthusiasts alike. But that wasn't all. I'd also cultivated a significant following as a fashion blogger, my social media filled with outfit ideas, trend forecasts, and behind-the-scenes peeks at the glamorous world of high fashion. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another 1,000 followers on Instagram. I smiled to myself, remembering the days when I'd celebrate each new follower like a personal victory. As I flipped through the glossy photos, my mind wandered to my own wardrobe. I'd come a long way from the hand-me-downs and bargain bin finds of my youth. Now, my closet was filled with designer pieces, each one carefully chosen to reflect my personal style and the image I wanted to project to the world. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Lily, now a teenager. "Aunt Monica, can you help me pick an outfit for my friend's birthday party this weekend?" I smiled, warmth filling my chest. Despite the distance I'd put between myself and Sarah, Lily and I had managed to maintain a close relationship. She'd inherited my love for fashion, and I relished every opportunity to share that passion with her. "Of course, sweetie," I texted back. "Why don't you come over on Saturday morning and we'll put something together?" Sarah. The thought of my sister still brought a twinge of discomfort. We barely spoke these days, our interactions limited to terse exchanges at family gatherings I couldn't avoid. She was still living with our parents, still playing the role of the wronged woman, still using Lily as a pawn in her games. But I refused to let thoughts of Sarah dampen my mood. I had too much to be grateful for, too much to look forward to. My career was thriving, I had a beautiful home that I'd bought with my own hard-earned money, I had Alex, my fiancé, and I was finally, truly happy. As I scrolled through the latest runway looks on my tablet, my phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, and I sighed, bracing myself for what was to come. "Monica," Sarah's voice was sharp, demanding. "Lily needs a new outfit for her school dance. Something designer, obviously. Just make sure it's expensive and trendy. Lily needs to look better than those other girls." Before I could respond, she hung up. I stared at the phone, a mix of anger and resignation washing over me. How had I become responsible for dressing my niece? Despite my frustration with Sarah, I couldn't help but feel excited about shopping for Lily. At 15, she was developing her own sense of style, and I loved helping her explore that. The next day, Lily and I hit the mall. We spent hours trying on dresses, giggling over some of the more outrageous designs. In the end, we settled on a beautiful emerald green dress that made Lily's eyes sparkle. As we left the store, bags in hand, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of resentment. I loved spoiling Lily, but Sarah's expectation that I would foot the bill for all of Lily's clothing needs was becoming too much. A week later, I found myself at my parents' house for a family dinner. The tension was palpable as soon as I walked in. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," Sarah sneered from her spot on the couch, phone in hand as usual. I ignored her, focusing instead on Lily, who ran to give me a hug. "Aunt Monica, I wore the dress to the dance. Everyone loved it." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I smiled, genuinely happy for her. My mother's voice cut through the moment. "Monica, don't you think it's a bit much? Buying such expensive clothes for Lily when your sister is struggling?" I blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" My father chimed in, his tone disapproving. "You're always dressed in designer clothes, driving that fancy car. Don't you think you could help out your family more?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Help out? I've been buying all of Lily's clothes for years now. Sarah hasn't spent a dime on her daughter's wardrobe and I don't know how long. Sarah's face twisted into a scowl. "Oh, so now you're going to throw that in my face? Some of us don't have cushy jobs writing about shoes all day." I stood there, stunned into silence. How could they not see the truth? How could they still be taking Sarah's side after all these years? As I drove home that night, tears of frustration stinging my eyes, I realized that some things would never change. No matter how successful I became, no matter how much I did for Lily, in my family's eyes, I would always be the selfish one, the one who needed to do more. However, there was something else in my life, besides a good job and a terrible family. My fiancé. 2 years had flown by since I met Alex. When he proposed on a quiet evening at home, I didn't hesitate to say yes. As a fashion journalist, I knew the importance of the perfect wedding dress. I reached out to a young Italian designer I'd featured in one of my articles. His avant-garde approach to bridal wear had caught my eye, and I knew he could create something truly special. When the dress arrived, my hands shook as I unzipped the garment bag. The moment I saw it, my breath caught in my throat. It was perfect, a delicate peach color that complemented my skin tone, with intricate lace detailing and strategically placed rhinestones that caught the light beautifully. I slipped it on, my heart pounding. As I looked in the mirror, I knew this was it. The dress hugged my curves in all the right places, the color making me look radiant. I felt like a bride, like the successful, confident woman I'd become. Without thinking, I snapped a picture and sent it to Sarah. Despite our differences, she was still my sister, and some small part of me hoped she'd be happy for me. Got my wedding dress, I texted along with the photo. What do you think? Her response was typically Sarah. Bit much, isn't it? You always did like to show off. I sighed, putting my phone away. I don't know why I expected anything different. Carefully, I hung the dress in my closet, already dreaming of the day I'd walk down the aisle in it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Between finalizing the guest list, choosing a venue, and keeping up with my work, I barely had time to breathe, let alone visit my family. One evening, as I was going over seating arrangements, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Monica, we haven't seen you in weeks," she said, her tone accusatory. "Lily's been asking about you." Guilt washed over me. In all the wedding chaos, I'd neglected my relationship with Lily. "I'm sorry, Mom. Things have been crazy with the wedding planning." About that, my mother's voice took on a familiar disapproving tone. "How much are you spending on this wedding? You know, a modest ceremony would be just as meaningful." I frowned. "Mom, I don't think that's any of your business." "Of course it is," she exclaimed. "We're your family. And speaking of family, have you thought about how you could help your sister instead of spending all this money on one day?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed anger, "this is my wedding. Alex and I are paying for it ourselves. How we spend our money is our business, not yours, and certainly not Sarah's." "Don't be so selfish, Monica," my mother scolded. "Family should come first." As I hung up the phone, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness wash over me. Even now, with one of the happiest days of my life approaching, my family couldn't simply be happy for me. Everything always had to revolve around Sarah and her needs. Just as the dust was settling from the wedding dress drama, a new storm was brewing. Lily was graduating high school, and with graduation came the inevitable school ball. My phone rang one afternoon while I was in the middle of a photo shoot. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Monica," Sarah's voice was demanding as ever. "Lily needs a dress for her graduation ball. I want you to buy her one from that new collection by, what's his name? The famous one you're always going on about." I knew exactly which designer she meant, and exactly how much his dresses cost. "Sarah, those dresses are incredibly expensive. We're talking thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. I'm not spending that kind of money on a dress Lily will wear once. It's not reasonable." "Fine," Sarah spat. "I'll tell Mom and Dad how greedy you're being. Don't bother calling Lily anymore." She hung up, leaving me standing in the middle of the studio, shaking with anger and frustration. True to her word, my parents called later that day, berating me for my selfishness and lack of family values. After a sleepless night, I came up with a solution. I called Lily, hoping she would answer, despite her mother's threats. "Lily, sweetie," I said, relieved to hear her voice. "I have an idea about your graduation dress. Why don't you come over and borrow one of mine? I have plenty of designer dresses you could choose from." There was a pause, then Lily's excited voice came through. "Really, Aunt Monica? That would be amazing." I could hear Sarah in the background, asking what was going on. After a moment, Sarah came on the line. "Fine," she said grudgingly. "We'll be over next week." A week later, I was at home, deep in concentration as I finished up an article for the magazine. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Sarah and Lily. "The dresses are upstairs in the guest room closet," I said, gesturing towards the stairs. "Why don't you two go up and take a look? I just need to finish this article." Sarah nodded curtly and led Lily upstairs. I returned to my computer, immersing myself back in my work. It seemed like only minutes had passed when I heard them coming back down. "That was fast," I said, surprised. "Did you find something you liked, Lily?" But before Lily could answer, Sarah was hurrying her out the door. "We need to go," she said abruptly. "Thanks for this." A few days after Sarah and Lily's strange visit, I decided to try on my wedding dress again. With all the family drama, I needed a reminder of the joy that was to come. I opened my closet, reached for the garment bag, and it wasn't there. Panic set in as I searched frantically through my entire wardrobe. The beautiful peach dress was nowhere to be found. And then it hit me, Sarah and Lily's hasty departure, their refusal to show me what they'd chosen. They hadn't borrowed a dress, they'd stolen my wedding gown. Furious, I drove to my parents' house. I burst through the door without knocking, making a beeline for Lily's room. There, hanging in her closet, was my peach wedding dress. "Lily," I called out, my voice shaking with anger and disappointment. "How could you do this? Why would you take my wedding dress?" Lily appeared in the doorway, her face pale and eyes wide with shame. Before she could speak, Sarah pushed past her, her face twisted with rage. "How dare you barge in here and accuse my daughter?" Sarah spat. "You're so greedy, you can't even lend a dress to your own niece for her graduation?" I was stunned. "Lend? Sarah, you stole my wedding dress." "This isn't just any dress, it's for my wedding day." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Oh, please, you have plenty of dresses. You're just jealous that Lily will look better in it than you ever could." "Jealous?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Sarah, you're the one who's always been jealous. Of my career, my success." The room fell silent. Then, from behind me, I heard my mother's voice. "Monica, how dare you speak to your sister that way?" I turned to see both my parents standing there, their faces masks of disappointment and anger. "But she stole my wedding dress," I protested. My father shook his head. "Always so selfish, Monica. Can't you think of anyone but yourself for once?" I stood there, feeling like I was drowning. How had this happened? How was I the villain in this story? Without another word, I grabbed my dress and left. The next day, my phone rang. It was Lily. "Aunt Monica, I'm so sorry." Her voice was small, trembling. "I didn't know it was your wedding dress. Mom said, she said you'd want me to have it. We didn't even look at the other dresses. I'm so sorry." My anger melted away. Of course Sarah had manipulated the situation, used Lily as a pawn in her games. "Oh, Lily," I sighed. "It's okay. I understand. How about we go shopping for a new dress?" "Your own dress, not a borrowed one." "Really?" The hope in her voice was palpable. "But I can't afford a nice dress." "Don't worry about that," I said. "But I have a proposal. The dress will be yours, but you'll pay it off in installments. By helping me with my wedding preparations." The day after our phone call, Lily and I hit the stores. It was a day filled with laughter, honest conversations, and a deepening of our bond. We finally settled on a stunning midnight blue gown that made Lily look like a princess. On the night of her graduation, Lily was radiant. As I watched her laughing with her friends, posing for photos, I felt a bittersweet pang. This wonderful young woman had grown up so fast, and I was grateful to be a part of her life. After the ceremony, as we sat in a quiet corner, I took a deep breath. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you." She looked at me, her eyes curious. "I've decided not to invite your mother to my wedding," I said gently. "And I don't think I'll be communicating with her anymore." Lily nodded slowly, surprising me with her calm reaction. "I understand, Aunt Monica. So, does this mean I can't come to the wedding either?" "Oh, no," I exclaimed. "Lily, you're absolutely invited. In fact, I was hoping you'd be one of my bridesmaids." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of wedding preparations, with Lily by my side every step of the way. When my parents found out about my decision to exclude Sarah, they called to inform me that they wouldn't be attending either. To my surprise, I felt more relieved than upset. The day of my wedding arrived, bright and beautiful. As I stood in front of the mirror in my peach dress, Lily helping me with the final touches, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The ceremony was perfect. Alex's face as I walked down the aisle, the love radiating from our friends and chosen family, Mason's surprising presence, my ex-brother-in-law. It all combined to create a day full of joy and new beginnings. As the reception wound down, Lily approached me, excitement written all over her face. "Aunt Monica, I got into college. In New York. Dad's helping me with the tuition." I hugged her tightly, thrilled for her new adventure. "Oh, Lily, that's wonderful. You're going to do great things, I just know it." In the months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Lily moved to New York for college, calling me regularly for advice on everything from fashion to study habits. "I want to be just like you, Aunt Monica," she'd say, making my heart swell with pride. I threw myself back into my work with renewed passion, my personal life finally free from the drama that had plagued it for so long. Alex was supportive and understanding, a true partner in every sense of the word. My name is Gina, and this is the story of how my life fell apart and then came back together. I'm 35 years old, and until recently, I thought I had it all figured out. I was the sales director at a large company, married to my college sweetheart, Mark, and we had just bought our first house. After graduation, I landed an entry-level job at a promising startup. I worked my way up the ladder, putting in long hours and sacrificing weekends. It paid off when I was promoted to sales director last year. Mark, on the other hand, had a harder time finding his footing. He bounced between a few jobs before settling as a shift supervisor at a mirror manufacturing company. Our best friends were another couple, Lisa and Tom. We met them at a neighborhood barbecue shortly after moving into our new house. Lisa was a stay-at-home wife, always impeccably dressed and with a spotless home. Tom was a successful entrepreneur who seemed to work as much as I did. When we bought our house, I was the one who qualified for the mortgage. I put it in my name and assumed all the responsibility for the payments. I didn't mind at the time, I was making good money, and I figured Mark would contribute when he could. As time went on, I noticed Mark becoming more and more dissatisfied with his job. He'd come home complaining about his boss, saying things like, "He's always on my case about everything. I can't do anything right," in his eyes. I tried to be supportive. "What happened this time?" I'd ask, setting aside whatever work I'd brought home. He called me out for being 5 minutes late, Mark would huff. "As if that makes a difference." And then he had the nerve to tell me how to talk to the clients. I'd been doing this job for years. I'd listen and nod, but inside I was growing frustrated. These seemed like normal workplace interactions to me, not the personal attacks Mark made them out to be. One day, Mark came home earlier than usual. I was in the middle of a conference call, but excused myself when I saw his face. "What's wrong?" I asked, muting my laptop. "I quit," he said simply. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You what?" I couldn't take it anymore. My boss made another comment about my attitude, and I just snapped. I told him where he could shove his job and walked out. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the panic rising in my chest. "Mark, we have a mortgage. We can't afford for you to be unemployed right now." He waved off my concern. "I'll find something better. Something where I'm appreciated." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just nodded and went back to my call. After Mark quit his job, our lives changed dramatically. I took on extra shifts and increased my workload, desperate to keep up with our mortgage payments and daily expenses. My days became a blur of meetings, sales calls, and late nights at the office. I was exhausted, but I didn't see any other choice. Meanwhile, Mark seemed to be in no hurry to find new employment. He'd occasionally mention an interview he'd been to, but there was always some reason it wasn't the right fit. The commute would be a nightmare, he'd say, or, the boss seemed like a real jerk. I tried to be patient, but my frustration grew with each passing day. One evening, I came home late to find Mark lounging on the couch, watching TV. "Hey," I said, dropping my bag by the door. "Have you eaten?" He looked up at me, frowning. "No, I was waiting for you to cook something." I stared at him in disbelief. "Mark, it's 9 p.m. I've been working since 7 this morning. Why didn't you make dinner?" "Because that's your job," he snapped. "You're never home anymore, Gina. The house is a mess, there's no food in the fridge, and I can't remember the last time we had a proper meal together." I felt my temper rising. "My job? My job is keeping a roof over our heads and food on the table." "What exactly is your job right now, Mark?" "I'm looking for work," he shouted. "Do you think I enjoy sitting around all day? But I'm not going to settle for just any job. I deserve better than that." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "I understand that, but we can't afford for you to be so picky right now. We have bills to pay." "Always about the money with you," he muttered. "What happened to supporting each other through thick and thin?" "I am supporting us," I said quietly. "But I need you to meet me halfway. Please, just try harder to find something. Anything. We can reassess once we're more stable." Mark didn't respond. He just turned back to the TV, effectively ending the conversation. I went to bed hungry and angry that night, wondering how much longer I could keep this up. The next day, I met Lisa for coffee during my lunch break. She looked fresh and relaxed, her hair perfectly styled and her nails freshly manicured. "Gina, honey, you look exhausted," she said, concern in her voice. "Are you getting any sleep at all?" I sighed, sipping my double espresso. "Not much. Work's been crazy, and things at home are tense." Lisa reached out and patted my hand. "You're working too hard. You need to take care of yourself, relax a little. Tom always says a happy wife makes for a happy life." I bit back a retort. Lisa meant well, but she had no idea what my life was like. "It's not that simple for us right now," I said instead. "But I'm sure things will get better soon." As the weeks went by, the tension in our house grew thicker. Mark's job search seemed to be going nowhere, and I was stretching myself thin, trying to keep everything afloat. Our conversations, when we had them, were short and often ended in arguments. One evening, I came home to find Mark dressed up, ready to go out. "Where are you going?" I asked, surprised. "Out with the guys," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "We're going to play golf." "Golf? At this hour?" I was skeptical, but too tired to argue. "Whatever. Have fun." As he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. But I pushed it aside, focusing instead on the mountain of work I'd brought home. The next day, I decided I needed a break. I took a rare day off from work and planned to surprise Mark with a weekend getaway. When I called to tell him, he seemed distracted. "This weekend? I can't. I've got plans with the guys again." I felt my heart sink. "Again? Can't you reschedule?" "No, it's important. Sorry, babe." He hung up before I could respond. Frustrated and hurt, I called Lisa. Maybe she and Tom would want to do something. "Oh, Gina," Lisa's voice was apologetic. "We'd love to, but Tom and I are visiting my parents this weekend." "Rain check?" I agreed, trying not to sound as disappointed as I felt. It seemed like everyone had plans except me. On a whim, I decided to go shopping. Maybe a little retail therapy would lift my spirits. As I was browsing through a department store, I heard a familiar voice. "Gina, what are you doing here?" I turned to see Tom, Lisa's husband, looking surprised and slightly uncomfortable. "Tom, I thought you and Lisa were visiting her parents this weekend?" His brow furrowed in confusion. "Her parents? No, we didn't have any plans. Lisa said she was spending the night at your place." My blood ran cold. "What? No, she's not with me. She told me you two were out of town." We found a quiet cafe and sat down. Tom looked grim as he spoke. "I've had suspicions for a while now," he said. "Lisa's been acting strange, always on her phone, making excuses to go out. I think our spouses might be having an affair." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I couldn't breathe. "No," I whispered. "They wouldn't." But even as I said it, pieces started falling into place. Mark's mysterious outings, Lisa's constant presence in our home, the way they looked at each other. Tom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm going to hire a private investigator. We need to know for sure. And we don't let on that we suspect anything. Can you do that, Gina?" I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. Yes, I can." As I drove home that evening, my mind was reeling. How had I not seen this coming? I walked into our house, half expecting to catch Mark and Lisa in the act. But the house was empty and quiet. Mark came home late, smelling of alcohol and mumbling about a great game of golf. The next 2 weeks were excruciating. I went through the motions of daily life, pretending everything was normal, while my insides churned with suspicion and dread. Mark continued his golf outings and job hunting charade, and I feigned belief in his increasingly transparent lies. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe in an hour." My heart raced as I made an excuse to leave work early. When I arrived at the cafe, Tom was already there, a thick manila envelope on the table in front of him. He slid the envelope across to me without further ado. With trembling hands, I opened it and began to look through the contents. There were photographs, credit card statements, hotel receipts, and transcripts of text messages. It was all there in black and white, irrefutable evidence of Mark and Lisa's betrayal. "How long?" I managed to choke out. Tom's voice was flat. "At least 6 months, according to the investigator. Maybe longer." I felt like I might be sick. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of me working myself to the bone while Mark. "There's more," Tom said quietly. "Gina, you need to check your bank accounts. All of them." Confused, I pulled out my phone and logged into my banking app. What I saw made my blood run cold. My savings account, the one I'd been quietly building up for years as an emergency fund, was empty. With shaking fingers, I checked my credit card balance, which I had given Mark to pay for gasoline. Maxed out. "He's been funding their little adventure with your money," Tom said, his voice tight with anger. "Fancy dinners, hotel rooms, gifts for Lisa. All on your dime." The shock gave way to a fury I'd never experienced before. All those times I'd come home exhausted, all the extra hours I'd put in, all the sacrifices I'd made, and this is how Mark repaid me? "What are you going to do?" I asked Tom, my voice surprisingly steady. He leaned back, a cold smile on his face. "I'm going to divorce Lisa and take her for everything she's worth. And then some." He paused, looking at me intently. "The question is, what are you going to do, Gina?" I took a deep breath, my mind racing. "I want revenge," I said slowly. "But I want them to suffer. I want them to feel as humiliated and betrayed as I do right now." Tom nodded approvingly. "I was hoping you'd say that. I have an idea, but it's going to take some planning." Over the next hour, Tom and I hatched a plan. It was devious, it was cruel, and it was exactly what Mark and Lisa deserved. That night, when Mark came home, I greeted him with a smile. Hey, honey, I said, kissing his cheek. Listen, I was thinking, why don't we throw a party next weekend? To celebrate our friendship with Tom and Lisa. It's been a while since we all got together. Mark's eyes lit up. Yeah, that sounds fun. I'm sure Lisa would love to help plan it. As I turned away, ostensibly to start dinner, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Mark and Lisa had no idea that their perfect little world was about to come crashing down around them. The week leading up to the party was a masterclass in deception. I threw myself into the preparations with a manic energy, playing the role of the perfect hostess. I called Lisa daily, discussing menu plans and decorations, all while picturing the look on her face when her world fell apart. The day of the party arrived, and our house was transformed. I had outdone myself with the decorations and food, determined that everything should be perfect for the grand finale. Guests started arriving in the early evening. I played the gracious host, making small talk and ensuring everyone's glasses were full. Tom arrived alone, explaining that Lisa would be there shortly. She was picking up a special dessert. When Lisa finally swept in, she was the picture of domestic perfection. Her hair was immaculate, her dress flattering, and in her arms was an elaborate cake. Sorry I'm late, she trilled, air-kissing my cheek. I wanted everything to be just right. As the evening progressed, I watched Mark and Lisa carefully. To the casual observer, there was nothing untoward in their interactions. But now that I knew what to look for, their stolen glances and subtle touches were glaringly obvious. Finally, as the sky outside darkened, Tom stood up and clinked his glass for attention. Everyone, if I could have your attention please, he said, his voice carrying across the room. Gina and I have prepared a little entertainment for you all. If you'd like to gather outside, we've set up a screen for an interesting film. There was a murmur of excitement as our guests filed out onto the back lawn. Mark looked at me, confused. What's this about? He asked. I smiled sweetly. Oh, just a little trip down memory lane. Come on, you don't want to miss this. Outside, everyone settled onto blankets and chairs, facing the large screen we'd set up. Tom started the projector, and at first, it showed innocent scenes, the four of us on various outings, laughing and having fun. I saw Lisa relax, probably thinking this was just a sentimental slideshow. How wrong she was. Suddenly, the music changed, becoming darker, more ominous. The images on the screen shifted, showing Mark and Lisa in various compromising positions, leaving hotels together, kissing in a car, entering our house when I was at work. A collective gasp went up from the audience. I heard Lisa's mother let out a strangled cry. Mark jumped to his feet. What the hell is this? He demanded. I stood up slowly, my voice ice cold as I addressed the stunned crowd. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what betrayal looks like. While Tom and I worked ourselves to the bone, our spouses were carrying on an affair behind our backs. Lisa was sobbing now, mascara running down her face. Gina, please, I can explain. Explain? I cut her off. Explain how you've been sleeping with my husband for months. Explain how you've been spending my hard-earned money on your little trysts. Tom stepped forward, his face grim. Lisa, don't bother coming home. I've already changed the locks. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. The party dissolved into chaos. Guests were whispering furiously among themselves. Lisa's parents were berating her, her father's face purple with rage. As the shocked murmurs of the guests subsided, I steeled myself for what I knew I had to do next. I walked back into the house, retrieved the manila envelope from my desk drawer, and returned to the lawn. Mark was still standing there, looking shell-shocked and pale. I thrust the envelope into his hands. Here are the divorce papers, Mark. I want you out of my house tonight, and I'll be demanding compensation from both you and Lisa for your betrayal. Mark fumbled with the envelope, his hands shaking. Gina, please, we can talk about this. I can explain. There's nothing to explain, I cut him off coldly. You've said enough with your actions. Now leave. He stood there, divorce papers in hand, looking as if he'd been slapped. Guests were approaching me, offering sympathetic words and support. In the middle of the lawn, Lisa had sunk to her knees, mascara running down her face as she pleaded with Tom. "Please, Tom, don't divorce me. I made a mistake. We can work through this." To my surprise, Mark rushed over to Lisa. He grabbed her arm and hissed, "Get up. Don't humiliate yourself like this. We can start over, make a new life together." Lisa's tear-streaked face contorted with fury. She yanked her arm away from Mark and spat, "Start over? With you? I don't need an unemployed man who can only pay compliments. I need someone who can actually support me." As the last of the guests trickled out, offering final words of support, Tom approached me. His face was a mask of controlled anger, but his voice was gentle when he spoke to me. "Gina, if you need any help, legal, financial, anything, please don't hesitate to call me. We're in this together, okay?" I nodded, grateful for his support. "Thank you, Tom. The same goes for you." As Tom left, I turned to Mark, who was standing alone, looking lost. "I want you gone by morning. Leave your keys on the kitchen counter." I turned my back on him and walked into the house, closing the door firmly behind me. Through the window, I watched as he slowly made his way down the driveway and out of sight. The house felt eerily quiet after the chaos of the evening. I sank onto the couch, emotionally and physically exhausted. Tears threatened to spill, but I held them back. I was sad, yes, mourning the death of my marriage and what I thought was a close friendship. But underlying that sadness was a sense of calm, even relief. For months, I had been carrying the weight of an unemployed, dissatisfied husband. I had worked myself to the bone, trying to keep our life afloat while he contributed nothing but complaints. Now, that burden was lifted. Yes, the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. In the weeks following the explosive revelation at the party, life took on a new rhythm. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the familiar routine of sales reports and client meetings. But unlike before, I made sure to maintain a healthier balance, reducing my overtime and actually using my vacation days. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Tom. He looked tired but determined. "Gina," he greeted me with a nod. "How are you holding up?" I managed a small smile. "I'm doing okay. How about you? Any news?" Tom's face hardened. "The divorce is final. I kicked Lisa out of the house last week." I wasn't surprised, but I still felt a twinge of something. Not quite sympathy, but a sense of shared experience. "How did she take it?" He shrugged. "Not well. Apparently, her parents meant what they said at the party. They refused to take her in or help her financially." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? That seems harsh." "They're old-fashioned. Adultery is a big deal to them." Tom sighed. "Last I heard, she's working as a sales clerk at some department store downtown." The irony wasn't lost on me. Lisa, who had always looked down on my career, was now forced to work a job she would have considered beneath her. "What goes around comes around, I suppose," I murmured. Tom nodded grimly. "How are things with Mark?" I rolled my eyes. "He won't stop calling and texting. Keeps begging for another chance. But I feel nothing. The love, the trust, it's all gone. I can't imagine ever wanting to be with him again." We parted ways, and as I drove home, I reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The next day, I met with my lawyer to discuss the progress of my own divorce proceedings. She greeted me with a triumphant smile. "Good news, Gina. The judge has reviewed the evidence, including the detective's report, and has ruled in our favor on all counts." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," my lawyer said, "that Mark has been ordered to pay you substantial compensation for his infidelity. Moreover, he's required to repay every cent he took from your reserve account and credit card for his affair with Lisa." As I left the lawyer's office, I felt lighter than I had in years. With the compensation and repayment from Mark, I was able to pay off the remainder of my mortgage in one fell swoop. The house was now truly, fully mine. That evening, as I was celebrating my newfound financial freedom with a glass of wine, my phone buzzed. It was Mark, again. "Gina, please," his message read. "I know I messed up. But I love you. Can't we try to work things out? I'll do anything." I stared at the message for a long moment. Once, those words might have moved me. Now, they just left me cold. I typed out a response. "Mark, stop contacting me. It's over. I don't love you anymore, and I don't want to try again. Please respect my decision and leave me alone." I hit send and then blocked his number. It felt final, decisive. And it felt good. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, that I was content with my newfound independence, fate threw me another curveball. It started innocently enough. Tom and I had been in regular contact since our respective divorces, offering each other support and companionship during this challenging time. One evening, about 2 months after my divorce was finalized, Tom called me. "Hey Gina," he said, his voice warm. "I was thinking. We've both been through hell lately. How about we celebrate our new beginnings? I could bring over a bottle of wine, and we could toast to our freedom." I hesitated for a moment, but then thought, why not? "Sure, Tom. That sounds nice. Come over around 8? When Tom arrived, bottle of expensive red wine in hand, I was struck by how different he looked. Gone was the stressed, angry man I'd seen at the fateful party. He seemed lighter, more relaxed. He'd even gotten a haircut that suited him well. We settled on my patio, the warm summer evening wrapping around us like a comfortable blanket. As we sipped our wine, our conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and moments of shared understanding. "You know," Tom said, refilling our glasses, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually grateful for what happened. It opened my eyes to so much." I nodded, understanding completely. "I know what you mean. It's like, we're finally free to be ourselves." As the night wore on and the wine bottle emptied, I found myself noticing things about Tom I'd never paid attention to before. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle timbre of his laugh, the strength in his hands as he gestured while talking. I'm not sure who made the first move. One moment we were laughing about some shared memory, and the next, we were kissing. That night, Tom and I crossed a line we'd never even considered before. When morning came, I woke up to find Tom already awake, watching me with a mixture of affection and uncertainty. "Gina," he said softly, "about last night. Last night was unexpected, but it felt right. Maybe we could date? Take things slow, see where this leads?" I found myself nodding, a smile spreading across my face. "I'd like that, Tom." Over the next few weeks, Tom and I embarked on a new journey together. We went on proper dates, dinners, movies, long walks in the park. To my surprise, Tom revealed a romantic side I'd never seen before. He brought me flowers, left sweet notes for me to find, and always seemed to know just what to say to make me smile. "You know," I said to Tom one evening as we cuddled on my couch, "I never would have predicted this." He chuckled, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Life's full of surprises, isn't it? But I have to say, this is one surprise I'm very grateful for." As I snuggled closer to him, I found myself agreeing wholeheartedly. We weren't looking too far into the future yet, both of us knew the importance of living in the present. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about what that future might hold.